Chapter 25-24. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. As soon as Shenji finished speaking, everyone was shocked. Especially the female military doctor who had come over to question whether Yunjian and Shenji could really go on the field with their skinny limbs. This female military doctor was called Wang Xiaofan. She was a battlefield female military doctor. The other one was very pretty, and she was the first to greet Zhang Heng. Her name was Zhang Meili. Zhang Meili, as her name suggested, was indeed very pretty. When she heard Yunjian and Shenji's conversation, Wang Xiaofan froze. Dan Zhengyu, Zhang Heng, Zhang Meili, and the others who were standing nearby, as well as the injured lying on the ground, were completely stupefied by the conversation between Yunjian and Shenji. It should be known that Zhang Heng and the others had sneaked out to steal firearms from the people of N country during the riots. It was very dangerous for them to return with firearms, and they could lose their lives at any time. But this woman who came with Yunjian actually said to Yunjian that they were going to steal tanks from the N nation people for fun. The two of them wanted to compete to see who could steal the most tanks. What were they doing? Were they daydreaming? Even Lu Cheng's face was pale with fright. After all, Yunjian and Shenji had been brought here by Lu Cheng. Gu Junjian had retired, and Lu Cheng was Yunjian and Shenji's superior. Before Yunjian could reply, Lu Cheng frowned and scolded Yunjian and Shenji. "Don't mess around." With that, Lu Cheng turned to Zhang Heng. "I'll take good care of them." Zhang Heng seemed to be the person with the highest rank in this temporary hideout, so everyone listened to him. He was the one who had brought everyone into N Nation not long ago, pretending to be a worker. When Zhang Heng heard Lu Cheng's words, he nodded lightly at Lu Cheng. He didn't care about what Shenji said to Yunjian. He waved at the people holding rifles and led everyone out of the hideout. Shenji had always been a man of his word. He didn't take Lu Cheng's words to heart. Instead, he walked over to Yunjian, grabbed Yunjian's shoulders, and was about to lead her out. Then it's settled. The winner pays. Shenji didn't care about what the others thought. But just when everyone thought that Yunjian would agree, Shenji said, "Yunjian," with a smack. Yunjian slapped Shenji's hand off her shoulder and crossed her arms over her chest, looking at Shenji in disdain as she spoke in front of everyone. "Are you trying to trick me? The winner pays." Shenji. If Yunjian didn't win, Shenji would claim that she was the one who beat Yunjian. And if Yunjian won, she would have to pay. Shenji was really good at scheming. But she found out. "Ha! Then I won't go." Shenji saw that her scheme had been discovered and turned to leave. Yunjian didn't stop her. "Where is your friend going? It's dangerous outside. Your friend is so pretty. If she meets N Nation people, then..." Zhang Meili was kind. She quickly walked over and asked Yunjian. Shenji was the kind of person who showed her fierceness on her face. Yunjian was the kind of person who hid a knife behind a smile. Zhang Meili didn't dare to ask Shenji directly because her expression looked fierce. She turned to Yunjian. Yunjian heard this and pursed her lips. Before Yunjian could say anything, Shenji heard Zhang Meili's words. She turned around and spoke in front of everyone who thought that she and Yunjian were good friends. "Friends? 006 and I will always be enemies. 006, I promised you to come to the battlefield to compete with you. Just you wait." Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Chapter 25-25. Page 1/1. Lu Cheng and Gu Junjian already knew that Shenji and Yunjian didn't get along, but Wang Xiaofan, Zhang Meili, Zhang Heng and the others thought that Shenji and Yunjian were friends. After all, only friends would say things like, "Whoever wins gets to treat," right? But when they heard Shenji's arrogant words, they were all stunned. Before they could recover, Yun Jian stretched out her thumb and brushed it across her red lips. She smiled playfully. Then, in front of everyone, she suddenly spoke to Shenji, who was leaving the hiding place. She used words that were several times more arrogant than Shenji's. 095, I accept your challenge. But before that, don't die on this battlefield, or I won't collect your corpse. 095 was Shenji's number. The two of them had always called each other by their numbers in Han. Hearing Yun Jian's words, everyone was stunned again. After all, Yun Jian and Shenji's words and actions, as well as the way they talked, were very unusual. Not only did they call each other by numbers, but they also refused to admit that they were friends. How could friends be like this? And Shenji's murderous aura was fierce, as if she was determined to fight Yun Jian to the end. It was as if she would never be satisfied until she defeated Yun Jian. Heh, I love hearing that. Shenji suddenly smiled a hair-raising smile. In the next second, she disappeared from her hiding place. Lu Qing and Zhang Meili didn't even have time to call her back before she was gone. When Zhang Meili finally reacted, her expression changed. She immediately shouted at Yun Jian. Your friend went out. You didn't stop her? This morning, a woman was gang-raped on the streets. N country is in chaos right now. It's not as simple as you think. Hurry up and get your friend back. Zhang Meili didn't dare to go out herself. This hiding place was very well hidden, at least for now. N country's people wouldn't be able to find this place. But recently, Zhang Heng had also discovered that N country's forces were moving towards this place. In a few more days, their hiding place here would become unsafe. They had to find a new hiding place and move their hiding place in time. Otherwise, if they were discovered by the forces of N country, they would probably die without a burial place. Zhang Meili was pretty and there were so many N country people outside. She didn't dare to chase after Shenji, so she could only say this to Yun Jian. Zhang Meili meant well. After all, normal people wouldn't say such things to Yun Jian at a time like this. Since Meili had spoken, it was time for Yun Jian would go find Shenzazazaz. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Yun Jian merely pressed her lips together. She had no intention of going out to look for the man. Instead, she went to the stairs and sat down in front of everyone, not minding the filth. She closed her eyes and said, I'm sorry. Just let her leave. She won't die anyway. The way he said it, when everyone heard this, they were even more stunned. You. How can you be so vicious? Even if she's not your friend, she should be someone who came with you. How can you do this? Wang Xuefei didn't like Yun Jian and Shenji at first. The two girls were actually here to support the battle. Now that she heard Yun Jian's words, she was even more pissed. Before Wang Xuefei could finish, however, Yun Jian spoke before her. What she said struck fear into everyone's heart. Don't worry. With her strength, she won't die. She won't die on the battlefield. If she dies, she'll die by my hands. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Chapter 25-26. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. When they heard Yun Jian's first sentence, everyone thought that Yun Jian and Shenji were just sharp-tongued, but they actually had a good relationship with each other. It was the kind of person who had a sharp tongue, but both of them treated each other as their best friends. However, when they heard Yun Jian's next sentence, everyone lost their composure. What did she mean by, if you die, you'll die by my hands? Everyone was stunned when they heard Yun Jian's words. Especially Wang Xuefei. She couldn't refute Yun Jian's words. Yun Jian wasn't lying. Shenji was almost invincible in this world, except for Yun Jian. Only Yun Jian had the ability to send Shenji to his death. I know that girl. She's very powerful, so don't worry about her. Gu Junjian spoke up. Gu Junjian didn't actually know Shunji. However, he knew that he already knew Yunjian's identity. She was slaying God, the #1 secret agent in the world. This meant that Shunji, who was by Yunjian's side, must have a powerful background as well. People like Yunjian and Shunji wouldn't die here so easily. Especially people like Yunjian and Shunji. The treatment they received in the past was probably much crueler than what they received on the battlefield. Moreover, Yunjian knew Shunji very well, so Gu Yunjian's words were purely to help Yunjian cover up her lie. When they heard Gu Yunjian's words, everyone silently agreed and kept quiet. After all, no one had forgotten their original intention of coming here. Those who were present did what they were supposed to do, and those who had nothing to do closed their eyes and rested, because there was no telling when a fierce battle would break out. At night, Zhang Hang and the rest returned from outside. The people who followed Zhang Hang out were more or less armed. It was obvious that they had taken these guns from the N Nation people. At that time, after Zhang Hang and the others entered the hiding place, a few people behind them supported a more seriously injured person into the hiding place. The people who went out were more or less bruised. The people who were quickly helped in later were the most seriously injured. Both of his legs were hit by bullets. Quick! Quick! Take a look at his injuries. Zhang Heng shouted at the female military doctors with a wretched expression. Hearing this, Wang Xuefei was the first to rush forward. Although Wang Xuefei was very doubtful of Yunjian and Shunji's strength, she was still very responsible. But just as Wang Xuefei was about to disinfect the wound and remove the bullet, a clear female voice rang out before she could. It's easy to get infected if you clean the wound directly. Wang Xuefei was stunned when she heard the crisp female voice. When she saw that it was Yunjian, she cast a sidelong glance at her. Do you know medicine? Aren't you here to support the battle? If Yunjian was also a female military doctor, Wang Xuefei wouldn't have doubted it. But Yunjian was a special forces soldier. She was here to support the battle. How could she know medicine? But while Wang Xuefei was still in shock, Yunjian had already taken out a certificate from her trouser pocket and threw it in front of Wang Xuefei. She looked ahead indifferently and didn't even look at Wang Xuefei. Just like that, she walked toward the injured person. At the same time, everyone's eyes widened. This is the certificate of a top international medical expert. There is a seal on it. His wounds must be treated immediately, or there will be a risk of amputation. Please make way. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-27. Yunjian didn't reveal her identity as the Hand of Death. She didn't want to cause trouble. Yunjian had specially prepared this international top medical expert certificate just in case. Sure enough, when they heard Yunjian's words, the people who were about to scold Yunjian for causing trouble all widened their eyes. International Top Medical Expert Certificate. This thing wasn't that easy to obtain. To obtain this thing, one had to be an international top medical expert. Wasn't she here to support the battle? How could she have such a thing in her hands? After hearing Yunjian's words, everyone present was dumbfounded. By the time everyone came back to their senses, Yunjian had already replaced Wang Xuefei and walked to the injured team member. Holding a scalpel, she cleaned the scalpel in the fastest way possible. Following a very standard and skillful knife technique, she removed the bullet from the injured team member and cleaned the wound. 10 minutes later. The surgery that would have taken a few hours was completed by Yunjian just like that. At the same time, Yunjian tied 2 bow ties around the wound on the team member's legs. At that time, everyone had yet to recover from their shock. Change the dressing on time. I'm going to rest. At this moment, Yunjian stepped on the edge of the certificate that she had just thrown on the ground. Her foot sent the certificate flying into the air. She gently reached out her hand and grabbed the document without even looking at it. She didn't even bend her back. She stuffed the certificate back into her trouser pocket and walked away after saying this. Seeing this, Zhang Heng heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he looked in the direction Yun Jian had left in for a few seconds. He had already cursed several times in his heart. Damn it, where did this talent come from? He actually met her. However, Zhang Heng didn't say anything else. The next day, Yun Jian was woken up by the commotion at the scene. She wasn't in a deep sleep, so she woke up quickly. She stood up and went downstairs. Then, Zhang Heng said to everyone with a pale expression, "Everyone, follow Officer Gu Junjian and evacuate quickly. Move quickly. Our hiding place has been discovered. It's the people from Country N. They are now attacking us with tanks. If we're any later, all of us will die here." Zhang Heng's words made everyone turn pale with fright. Everyone was so nervous that their expressions changed drastically. A few ordinary people from Country Z were so scared that they started crying in public. After saying this, Zhang Heng led a group of Special Forces soldiers who had come to support the battle in the direction of the N nation's tanks. They had to find a good place to block that group of people and fight for a chance for everyone to escape. By the time Zhang Heng and the others arrived at the scene, the people from Country N had already started to drive their tanks over while firing their cannons. Firearms were completely useless against tanks. "Captain, what should we do?" Someone looked at Zhang Heng and asked. "We have no choice but to use grenades and human flesh." Zhang Heng clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. The bottom of the tank was the fatal point. If he wanted to blow up a tank, he would have to rush to the bottom of the tank with a bag of explosives and use his own death in exchange for the destruction of the tank. And now, there was no other way. Just when everyone had lost the confidence to survive, they could only stall for a little bit of time so that the people behind them could escape quickly. However, one of the enemy's tanks suddenly changed direction, then, with a boom, this tank suddenly helped them and bombed Country N's tanks. This was definitely a shocking scene. But just as everyone present was shocked by the scene in front of them, they couldn't believe that the enemy's tank would suddenly bomb their own tank. Zhang Heng suddenly looked into the distance. He remembered that when he came out, he seemed to have seen Yun Jian not leave with the main group. Instead, she followed them here, but now she was nowhere to be seen. His pupils suddenly widened, and in front of everyone, he was shocked. "That tank, it's her. It's her. She really stole the N nation's tank." If you want to talk about campus rebirth, the strongest female agent, with more like-minded people, follow excellent reading literature on WeChat. Talking about life, looking for a confidant. Chapter 25-28. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Many colors flashed across Zhang Heng's face at this moment. However, from the colors in his eyes, one could tell that he was deeply shocked by what was happening in front of him. "Captain, you're saying," even the group of special forces beside Zhang Heng, who were also dressed like ordinary refugees but carrying guns in their hands, who had come all the way from Z country to provide support, widened their eyes in surprise when they saw the enemy tank in the distance suddenly helping them fight against their own tank. Gu Junjian led everyone to retreat from the rear while Lu Cheng followed Zhang Heng and the others to defend against the attack of the N nation people. This was the original arrangement. At this time, after Lu Cheng heard Zhang Heng's words, his pupils suddenly widened to the maximum. He stared at the tank that suddenly helped them to bombard the N nation people and said in shock, "Could it be her? It's really her. It's the killing god." Boom. 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 In the next second, Lu Cheng's words were drowned out by the explosions of the tanks that had suddenly turned around to attack them. If a tank wanted to turn, it would be a little cumbersome. Of course, it would vary from person to person. It was just like driving a car. Some people were nimble when driving a car and could even drive through a distance of 1 millimeter. However, Some people were clumsy when driving a car and might even crash into the wall when the rear of the car was still a few meters away from the wall behind because of a miscalculation. Driving a plane, a ship, and a tank was the same as driving a car. Of course, most people who drove a tank would not be able to drive as agility as a car. After all, even the lightest tank weighed a few tons or dozens of tons. Of course, this was only true for most people. For Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, Lu Cheng, and the others who had just laid down in their hiding spot and prepared to fight to the death with the N Nation people who had tanks, they were not only shocked by how the tank was robbed by Yun Jian. What was even more frightening and shocking was the operating skills of the tank in front of them. The N Nation people sent 7 tanks to attack them. One of them was hijacked, and it was 6 tanks against 1. However, the tank that was hijacked by Yun Jian moved the tracks on both sides of the tank fiercely in the opposite direction. After the tank made a half-turn, it immediately stopped and directly shot one of the tanks. After that, the tank that Yun Jian had hijacked flew forward. Taking advantage of the few seconds when the other tanks had yet to react to why their own tank had suddenly attacked them, they hesitated about whether to counterattack. Boom! 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 A series of explosions rang out. The remaining 5 tanks were blown up one after another in front of the enemy commander. Hat! 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 What's going on? You're crazy. Was he crazy? Quickly bomb this tank. He was crazy. Helping the enemy bomb us? He's crazy. At this moment, the enemy commander retreated with a frightened expression. His body trembled as he shouted out these words. He thought that there was something wrong with the tank driver on his side. However, just as the enemy commander thought that there was something wrong with the tank driver on his side, the enemy troops carried explosives on their backs and were ready to rush to the bottom of the tank and blow up the tank's tracks at any time. However, just as the enemy was about to take action, the top door of the tank opened. A petite figure jumped out of the top door of the tank in front of the enemy commander. The local commander, who originally thought that something was wrong with his pilot, saw this petite figure and was so frightened that his expression changed abruptly. With a trembling voice that could be heard by Zhang Heng and the others, he said in a trembling voice, "What's the matter? It's a woman. What's going on? How could it be a woman? When did she replace our driver and sneak into the tank? It's too terrifying. This woman. Too terrifying." Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-29. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation. Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. He had seen with his own eyes how the tank driver had entered Tucker's gate and operated the tank. He had not noticed anything amiss along the way. This woman, when did she sneak in? Commander, One of the enemy commander's subordinates saw this and came to the commander's ear to ask for instructions on what to do next. Retreat. We're retreating. The enemy commander was frightened by Yun Jian, who was standing on top of the tank and looking down at the entire battlefield. Even though he was leading over 1,000 men and had the support of the original 7 tanks, he was still completely shocked by Yun Jian's methods. The group of people quickly turned around and retreated. Zhang Heng and the rest who were standing far away were stunned when they saw this. Lu Cheng, I didn't expect you to have such a powerful subordinate under you. After recovering from the shock, Zhang Heng patted Lu Cheng's shoulder and laughed out loud. Although Zhang Heng and the rest did not understand what the group of N Nation people were saying, they could tell that the group of N Nation people were probably planning to retreat. They did not even want to kill Yun Jian, who was standing on top of the tank and looked so easy to deal with on the surface. Sir, you're too kind. Lu Cheng heard that he was praised by his superior and naturally felt an indescribable joy in his heart. Moreover, Yun Jian had turned the tables in the previous deadlock. 7 tanks against them, they were definitely going to die. But at this moment, the N Nation people were planning to retreat. However, just as the N nation commander was about to lead his men to retreat, a soft and indifferent voice that could make one's hair stand on end and tremble uncontrollably suddenly rang out. "You guys still have delusions of leaving this place alive?" Yun Jian's words were spoken in a very authentic N nation language in front of everyone. Her voice was cold and there was no emotion in her words. When they heard this, not only did the N nation commander and the 1,000 men who followed him turn around in shock and stare at Yun Jian, even Zhang Hang and the rest who were far away thought that Yun Jian was crazy. Zhang Hang had a subordinate who knew N nation language and he translated what Yun Jian had said to the group of people who were about to leave. Crazy. Didn't she know that N nation was currently in a state of chaos? Riot. The forces in N nation are divided into several factions. They kill the Z nation people as they please. How many innocent women were killed? Some were even gang raped on the streets. Now that we've met this group of natives, it's already a blessing that they're willing to leave without doing anything. But what is she doing? Does she know that she's also a woman? If he were to be caught by the N nation people, he would be in utter misery. It wasn't just physical humiliation, it was mental devastation. It would be worse than death. All of you stay here, I'll go and bring her back. Zhang Hang threw the rifle in his arms to one of his subordinates, grabbed a dagger in his hand, and jumped away from his hiding spot. However, just as Zhang Hang jumped out of his hiding spot and was about to walk over to Yun Jian, a voice suddenly rang out. F***CK. This woman was courting death. Brothers, let's fight it out with her. The subordinates of the N nation's leader were the first to voice their displeasure. Don't kill her, capture her alive. Destroy 6 of our tanks, and everyone will take turns to F***CK her to death. Words like these rang out loudly. With that, the N nation group suddenly rushed toward Yun Jian, who was standing on top of the tank. F***CK. They didn't believe that they couldn't even capture a woman alive with their thousands of people. However, just as the enemy leader's subordinates rushed toward Yun Jian, exposing their true nature to the extreme, Yun Jian didn't wait for the crowd to reach her. In front of Zhang Hang and the others in the distance, she flashed an extremely strange smile at the enemy leader and the thousands of people. In the next second, she smoothed out the curve of her mouth and grinned like a harmless little girl. Suddenly, she waved gently at the enemy leader and the thousands of people. Time's up, farewell everyone. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-30. If it weren't for the fact that Yun Jian had destroyed 6 tanks at the same time, everyone would have thought that she was just a harmless girl the moment they saw Yun Jian smile. She was innocent, pure, and out of this world. Even Zhang Heng, Lu Cheng, Dan Zhengyu, and the others in the distance had the same illusion. Yun Jian might really be a harmless girl. That faint smile made everyone stop in their tracks. Don't just stand there. Come with me to save her. It's impossible for her to deal with thousands of people alone. Zhang Heng fastened his dagger to his waist and rushed toward Yun Jian. When the rest of the people heard Zhang Heng's words, they quickly followed Zhang Heng and approached Yun Jian. However, just as Zhang Heng and the others moved forward with all their might to save Yun Jian, they were less than 3 meters away. Boom! 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 A series of explosions took place. The moment the explosion sounded, Yun Jian jumped off the tank easily and walked toward Zhang Heng and the others. Just as Zhang Heng and the others had yet to realize where the series of explosions came from, in the distance, the commander of Country N and his nearly 1,000 subordinates were already shouting. Land mines! Land mines! Everyone, run! That woman planted land mines. It's all a trap. We've fallen into a trap. Run! Run! I don't want to die. Ah! All kinds of screams rang out. At this moment, the battlefield behind Yun Jian had turned into the entrance to hell. This group of Country N's unforgivable team who had used knives, sticks, and weapons to kill Z people on the streets and gang-raped Z women in front of them were buried in the series of landmine explosions behind Yunjian. The landmines at the scene were buried very well. The tank that Yunjian drove just now had led all of them to the center of the minefield. Not a single one of them had the ability to survive. They, Country N, should pay the price for bullying the Z people. It was clear that Yunjian was just a teenage girl, but behind her were countless battlefields. It was clear that she was looking at thousands of enemies. However, she was not afraid in the face of danger and displayed a deterrent aura that others could never achieve in their lifetime. She had set up a strategy that could eliminate thousands of enemies without her personally. Looking at the continuous explosion of landmines behind Yunjian, they saw that Yunjian seemed to be unaffected by the ground tremors caused by the landmines and the deafening explosions. At that moment, she put her hands in her pockets and walked toward Zhang Hang and the others. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hang and the others seemed to see a ruler descending. It was as if she had the power to dominate the world. In this place, she was the king. After some time, the explosion of landmines explosions finally stopped. Yunjian's also Zhangzi's. At this moment, Zhang Heng opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just as everyone wanted to ask Yunjian how she could stand out, Yunjian suddenly looked behind them and said, "Thank you for your hard work." With that, Zhang Heng and the others were stunned. Hard work? What hard work? Zhang Heng and the others were stunned. They turned around and saw that Shenji, who had left yesterday, was already standing in front of them. Before anyone could react, Yunjian pursed her red lips again. Ignoring the people in front of her, she spoke again to Shenji behind her. Compared to 10 years ago when we worked together to blow up 100,000 enemies in Country L, I'm more satisfied with this cooperation. M. Chapter 25-31. 10 years ago? The 100,000 people who died in an explosion in Country L? Yunjian's words stunned Zhang Hang and the others. What did she mean by the 100,000 people who died in an explosion in Country L 10 years ago? Had they been on the battlefield before? Lu Qing suddenly remembered that Yunjian had told Shenji that it had been almost 10 years since they had been sent to the battlefield together. Lu Qing, who recalled this, lifted his head abruptly to look at Yunjian with widened eyes. Could it be, that thing really did happen? Yunjian didn't see everyone's reaction. She ignored Zhang Hang and the others and looked at Shenji. Hey, compared to the battle to the death in Country L 10 years ago, I prefer today's cooperation. Shenji suddenly smiled eerily. The next second, Shenji raised his head and looked at Yunjian with his chin. He repeated, but only today. 006, next time, we'll have to rely on our own abilities. I will definitely surpass you. Just you wait. Shenji had never changed his belief. In other words, surpassing Yunjian had become Shenji's motivation to survive. It was an indispensable source of motivation for Shenji. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and silently agreed. By the time they found the new hiding place that Gu Junjian and the refugees from Country Z had found, it was already the morning of the next day. As soon as he saw Yunjian and the others return, Gu Junjian and the others surrounded them and asked worriedly, "Are you hurt? Bro, you're lucky to have a daughter like this." Zhang Heng's first words were praise for Gu Junjian. Hearing this, Gu Junjian was confused. Wang Xuefei heard Zhang Heng's words and was very suspicious. She looked at Yunjian and couldn't help but ask, "She didn't drag you down, right?" Huh. Zhang Heng laughed and pursed his lips after hearing Wang Xuefei's words. Then he said to Wang Xuefei in front of everyone, "If it wasn't for her yesterday, all of us would have died on the battlefield." Because everyone had nothing to do, Zhang Heng deliberately kept them in suspense. Hearing this, everyone became more interested in Yunjian. "Captain Zhang, quickly tell us, what happened to you? Also, would that group of people from N Nation come looking for him? Will it be dangerous for us to stay here? Someone hurriedly asked after hearing Zhang Heng's words. Is it really that powerful? Wang Xuefei pouted, unconvinced. After Wang Xuefei said this, Zhang Heng added, the team from country N we encountered this time sent 7 tanks over. When a man and a tank clashed head-on, anyone would know who had the upper hand. Then, Captain Zhang, are you all right? One of the refugees asked nervously after hearing Zhang Heng's words. Of course I'm fine. Then I have to tell you guys about Yun Jian's capabilities. She joined forces with that guy and killed the enemy commander and thousands of people. At that time, I was really scared. In his free time, Zhang Heng was also a person who liked to brag. Since everyone had nothing to do here, they listened to Zhang Heng's bragging. However, just as everyone was bragging the most, Yun Jian, who had been silently fiddling with her phone, suddenly stood up and turned the phone upside down. The screen was facing everyone and she said something that made everyone's pupils shrink. My people are almost at the border of country N. Do you want to leave country N? If you want to leave, take advantage of the chaos after my people kill their way out of country N's border. Chapter 25-32. This time, Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, and the rest brought Lu Cheng, Gu Junjian, and the rest of the special forces into country N to provide support. Their mission was not to start a war with country N. Their goal sounded simple, but it was rather difficult to achieve. It was to bring all the refugees from country Z who were scattered all over country N back to their country safely. No matter where you went in the world, the country would never give up on you. Therefore, Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, and the rest led the team and risked their lives to come to country N. Of course, out of selfishness, they also wanted to bring back the bodies of their comrades who had unfortunately died in country N back to their motherland. At present, there were hundreds of refugees from country Z hiding in this hideout. Zhang Heng dared to take the risk of bringing Yun Jian and the rest into country N because even if something unexpected happened, Yun Jian and the rest would definitely have the ability to protect themselves. However, this group of refugees was different. They were just ordinary people. If anything happened, they would definitely die. Moreover, with hundreds of people traveling together, it was very likely to attract attention. Therefore, Zhang Heng and the rest had been waiting for the opportunity to send this group of refugees back to their country. But now, Yun Jian suddenly stood up and told him that there was such an opportunity to send this group of refugees who had been innocently affected by the recent riot back to their country. This was great news for Zhang Heng and the rest. Just a moment ago, Zhang Heng was still bragging to everyone about Yun Jian's ability on the battlefield. At this moment, Zhang Heng had already jumped down the stairs and rushed to Yun Jian. He asked in surprise, "Really? Yun Jian, is the information you gave me accurate? What are the chances of success?" Yun Jian's words gave the refugees lying around a glimmer of hope for survival. However, just as a glimmer of hope ignited in everyone's hearts, Yun Jian suddenly said, 50%. After speaking, she emphasized again, only half of you here can leave country N alive. When my people kill their way into country N's borders, you must take advantage of the battle between the two sides to rush out of country N's borders. Because if we win the battle, country N will immediately send troops over. If you don't take advantage of the chaos and leave quickly, you will be killed on the spot by the country N army coming from behind. By then, none of you will be able to escape. What he meant was that if they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to leave N country, they had to rush out of N country while Yun Jian's men were fighting with N country's troops stationed at the border. If he was careless and got hit in a vital spot, then he could only blame himself for being careless. All the refugees and special forces, including Zhang Heng, who had their hopes rekindled, fell into silence again at her words. What Yun Jian was implying was that out of the hundreds of people present, only half of them could leave country N alive if they chose to leave. A 50% survival rate. Why? Why did we have to encounter such a thing? I'm just going to country N for a vacation. Why did something like this happen? Aren't you soldiers very powerful? It wasn't easy for us to survive until now, but you're telling us that only half of us can leave this place alive. I don't want to stay in this damned place anymore. You want to take us away. You're soldiers, you have to protect us unconditionally. Not long after Yun Jian said this, a trembling male voice that had been suppressed for a long time sounded. The person who spoke was a very inconspicuous middle-aged man squatting in the corner. This middle-aged man wore square-framed glasses and had the aura of a cultured person. My wife died a few days ago. He had been killed by those inhumane people from N country. I don't want to stay here anymore. Aren't you soldiers who serve the people? Then think of a way to get us out of here. Why must there be sacrifices? Aren't you supposed to protect our lives? If you can't even protect our lives, then what's the use of having you here? Perhaps it was because of fear, this middle-aged man who wore glasses and looked very elegant became agitated. When people were in extreme fear and panic, their humanity would be exposed to the highest point. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, those refugees who had been helped by Zhang Heng, Wang Xuefei, Zhang Meili, and the others could no longer hold it in. Because of the fear of death, they shouted endlessly. That's right. Didn't you come to country N to protect us? If you can't even guarantee our safety, then what's the use of having you here? You still call yourself soldiers. I think you're a bunch of cowards. Take us home. You said you'd take us home. We don't want to die. Why can't you soldiers rush in front of us to protect us? Chapter 25-33. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Only when one was forced into a helpless situation would the darkness of one's human nature erupt to the highest point. The reason why the people of N Nation killed Z Nation citizens and raped women for no reason was because of the chaos in N Nation. There were two factions fighting for the throne, and the people of N Nation had nowhere to go. Without the restrictions of the country's laws, the immoral things that people could do were countless times more disgusting than one could imagine. Z Nation's laws were perfected, so robberies, murders, and rapes were greatly reduced. N Nation was now in a state of being without a ruler, let alone laws. In a society governed by law, there would still be rapes, robberies, and murders. Imagine what would happen in a country without laws and without restrictions. The middle-aged bespectacled man, who usually looked like a gentleman, but at this moment, he was showing off the ugliness of human nature to the extreme. Everyone present protested loudly. Bring us home safely. Bring us home safely. Bring us home safely. With the middle-aged man with glasses taking the lead, all the refugees raised one hand and shouted. When they were first rescued by Zhang Heng and the others, this group of refugees had just escaped from death. At that time, to this group of refugees, it was already very good to meet the people sent by the country to save them. That was already a blessing from the heavens. Because if they had not met Zhang Heng and the others sent by the country to protect them, they would have been killed by the people of N Nation like the others. The women were directly sent to hell after their bodies were ravaged. But as time passed, everyone was already dissatisfied. It had been so long, why was no one sending them back to their country? In the end, Yun Jian announced in front of everyone that she could send them back to their country. But the survival rate was only 50%. They did not want to die. After seeing their relatives and friends being killed by the people of N Nation and dying in various ways, their fear of death deepened. So, they did not want to die and could not die. Everyone, be quiet. We will protect you from behind and do our best to let each and every one of you leave N Nation safely. So please be quiet and wait for me to finish, okay? Zhang Heng saw that all the refugees who were sitting on the ground had stood up. They were so angry that they looked like they wanted to kill someone. He tried to calm himself down. But his fists were clenched involuntarily. Of course, he wanted to send everyone back to Z country safely. His responsibility was to bring everyone present back to Z country safely. However, every day they spent here meant that they were in greater danger than before. Just like yesterday, if it were not for Yun Jian and Shen Ji, Zhang Hang and the others would be the first to die, and then the refugees protected by Zhang Hang and the rest. Not a single person could have survived. Zhang Hang had wanted to communicate with the refugees calmly, translation, but the refugees refuted him even. Until we leave N Nation safely. N Nation is. You said that you will when the time is when? Is the time? ISN, everyone. The middle-aged man with glasses translation is. That's right. You soldiers must bring us out safely. Otherwise, we will not listen. We will not be quiet. Zhang Hang's peaceful words attracted even more angry retorts. Just as the situation spiraled out of control, Yun Jian, who was already standing at the highest point in everyone's sight, spoke with a chilling voice, "You're the one who's going to be killed. I still have 10 explosives. If you don't control your annoying mouths in 3 seconds, I will blow them up for you." Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-34. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1, Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. This cold and emotionless voice resounded through the crowd. As soon as the voice rang out, everyone's gaze shifted from Zhang Hang to the pile of junk that was 5 to 6 meters high. At some point in time, Yun Jian was already standing on the pile of junk that was 5 to 6 meters high with ease with her back to the group. This pile of junk was 5 to 6 meters high. Just looking at it gave people a feeling that it was on the verge of collapsing. If a person were to stand on top of it, there was even a possibility of falling off the tall and unstable pile of junk at any time. However, Yun Jian, who was the center of attention, stood on top of the pile of junk like a feather. She was so steady that no one could find any flaws. As soon as these frightening words left her mouth, everyone saw that she was playing with a few explosives in her hands. She was toying with the explosives fearlessly, as if she could ignite them at any moment. Everyone was so scared that they trembled violently. In less than 3 seconds, the discontented refugees all shut their mouths. Zhang Hang, Dan Zhengyu, Lu Cheng, the female military doctors, Wang Xuefei, Zhang Meili, and the others were all stunned by Yun Jian's intimidating aura. Just now, Zhang Hang had tried to persuade him with kind words, but it was useless. She was just a teenage girl, but she had single-handedly forced all the refugees to shut their mouths. "Captain, this little girl is really a talent. If we have the chance to return to our country, we must report this to our superiors." A special forces soldier standing next to Zhang Hang saw this and whispered in Zhang Hang's ear. Zhang Hang didn't reply, but he knew what was going on. This group of refugees finally quieted down completely. At this moment, Yun Jian suddenly threw the explosives in her hands onto the second floor. From the first floor, a hand suddenly reached out from the empty darkness next to the railing on the second floor. Shen Ji, who didn't live with the crowd, was already standing on the second floor. She caught the explosives that Yun Jian threw over. Seeing this, the group of refugees who had been unconvinced shut their mouths. Not a single person dared to utter a single word under such circumstances. "I'll say it right here. Whether you live or die, it has nothing to do with us. It's our responsibility to save you. But why should we defend you from the enemies again and again just to save you? If we save you, will you take care of us in our old age? If we save you, will you give your lives to us? If we save you, will you do anything for us?" Yun Jian suddenly said. When these words were said, the refugees standing on the flat ground were completely speechless. Yun Jian's lips suddenly curled into a red arc. Her indifferent and cold expression made the group of refugees panic for no reason. Just as the group of refugees fell silent, Yun Jian spoke again. This time, the group of refugees turned pale with fright. I'm the one who gave you the 50% chance of survival this time. Since I gave you a 50% chance of survival to leave country N, I have the right to take back this 50% chance of survival. Wait for your deaths in country N. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-35. Every word that Yun Jian said pierced into their hearts. If the bespectacled man who had started the uprising was still dissatisfied with Yun Jian's statement that they only had a 50% chance of returning to country Z alive, then this time, Yun Jian would even take back the 50% chance of survival that she had given them. If they stayed in country N, they would definitely die. You bunch of inhumane people, just wait to die in country N. At this moment, a refugee who had not spoken since the beginning, an old man who was in his 50s and close to 70 years old, suddenly spoke. As the old man spoke, he hugged his chest and huffed angrily. Just as he said this, the old man leaned against the corner of the wall and sat down. After he sat down, he used the tone of an elder to berate everyone present. Captain Zhang can bring people to country N to save us. Don't tell me his own situation isn't dangerous now. Don't tell me his soldiers aren't in danger now. Why did they take such a risk to come to country N to save us? They could have just stayed in their own countries and not gotten involved in any danger. Are you their relatives or friends? Let me ask you, bunch of crazy people, has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Go to hell. Now, even your last chance has been ruined by yourselves. Anyway, this old man already has one foot in the coffin. Just wait for your deaths. Although this old man was old, every word he said was the truth. After he finished speaking, the group of refugees in the downtown area all shut their mouths. Most of the refugees, including the bespectacled middle-aged man, lowered their heads. Not long after, someone said to Yun Jian, Zhang Heng, and the others, "Sorry, we were wrong. We shouldn't have done this." With one person taking the lead, everyone followed suit and apologized. However, Yun Jian did not have any reaction. She jumped down from the 5-meter-tall pile of debris and walked to the side. Everyone, listen to me. We have been hiding in country N, and there are already country N's troops targeting us. It's impossible for us to hide every time, and it's also impossible for us to win against country N's troops every time. Because we only have so few people. This is probably really the last chance. Whether you choose or not, it's up to you. But here, I, Zhang, express that as soldiers, we will do our best to bring you back home. Zhang Heng waited for everyone to calm down before speaking. If it was said that Yun Jian and Zhang Heng's words had attracted the sarcasm of all the refugees, then at this moment, all the refugees were grateful. In the end, it was only when Gu Junjian stepped in that Yun Jian agreed to reveal the exact time of the battle between her people and the N people. When Yun Jian's men fought against the army at the border of N country, they had to send someone to kill the leader of the army directly to have a chance of winning. I'm the best at sneaking in and killing the leader of a place. After all, I used to be a spy. Let me do it. Zhang Heng said to a female Special Forces soldier beside him. However, when everyone heard the female Special Forces soldier's words and decided to let her try infiltrating the base, the female Special Forces soldier's voice suddenly rang out. Suddenly, everyone's vision blurred. They saw that Yun Jian was already dressed in a tight suit and tight pants. There was a pistol strapped to her thigh and 2 butterfly knives on both sides of her waist. It was the standard female Special Forces outfit. While everyone was stunned, she said something that made everyone present, including Zhang Heng, Zhang Meili, and all the refugees, stunned. Damn, no one is better at assassination than me. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 25-36. In the blink of an eye, Yun Jian had already changed into her outfit for the mission. This scene stunned everyone present. The next second, everyone regained their senses. Are you sure you can do it? When it comes to assassinating the leader of a target, you can only succeed once. Otherwise, you won't have any chance of success if you send someone to assassinate him again. Miss Yin Yu used to be a proper female spy. She even participated in a mission to eliminate a smuggling group 8 years ago. As a female spy, she infiltrated the smuggling group and hid for 5 years. Finally, she became the new leader of the smuggling group and uprooted the entire smuggling group. When it comes to assassination, it's not about brute force. Although I heard that you know how to drive a tank, Miss Yin Yu is still the best at assassination. The bespectacled middle-aged man who had led the protest earlier, who usually looked refined, stood up and said. The middle-aged man who was leading the protest was called He-Wan. It was a very simple and honest name. He was born a farmer and spent a few years studying. His academic results were so good that he was always the top student in the city. Because he was too focused on his studies, he even wore glasses. However, when he was in his second year of high school, something happened to his family and He-Wan dropped out of school. After that, he wandered around in society and came to Country N to work. He used to be a genius in his studies. Without nurturing, he was no different from an ordinary person now. Now, in order to survive, he refuted Yun Jian's words after hearing them. Yin Yu was the female Special Forces soldier who used to be a spy. Her full name was Lu Yinyu. Lu Yinyu had been with the refugees since a few months ago. In Country N, where their lives were in danger and they didn't know if they would have a tomorrow, the refugees only knew to listen to Lu Yinyu and the others talk about how they used to be Special Forces soldiers. Everyone took turns telling stories to pass the time. He-Wan had heard about Lu Yinyu's past as a female spy from a group of Special Forces soldiers, so he quickly spoke up. Actually, most of the refugees present apologized after hearing the old man's words because they were afraid that Yun Jian wouldn't even give them the last chance to return to their country because of this. The assassination of the leader of the army guarding the border of Country N was to allow Yun Jian's men to easily subdue the army. To put it bluntly, it was to create more chances for them to escape. Thus, He-Wan, as well as all the refugees present, naturally hoped that the strongest among them would assassinate the other party's leader. That's right, let Miss Yin Yu go. Miss Yin Yu's strength is obvious to all. After He-Wan finished speaking, someone immediately spoke up. I support Miss Yin Yu. I support Miss Yin Yu. The crowd became rowdy again. Yun Jian ignored him this time. She bent down and picked out a dagger from the pile of weapons at the side. With the blade facing down, she held the hilt and walked out. She didn't explain, but she didn't follow the group's instructions either. Why don't we go together? Lu Yinyu was a very reasonable person. Seeing that the people around her refused to stop talking, she readied her weapon and jogged after Yun Jian after saying what she had to say. Currently, in Country Zhezhou Province, Longmen City, Qin Yiru was arranging her photo album. There was a pile of photo albums on the floor. Ding dong, the doorbell rang then. Qin Yiru glanced at the two fellows and her son. Seeing that they were having fun on the sponge cushion, she went to open the door. It was her next-door neighbor. After chatting for a while, Qin Yiru came back. She happened to see the little girl babbling, "Mama, Papa." The little girl was holding a family photo in her hand. The girl suddenly folded the photo and giggled. Siyi's thin lips in the photo and Yun Jian's pink lips in the photo were stuck together because of the folding. "Mama, Mama, Mama. Papa, Papa. He, kiss kiss kiss. M." Chapter 2537. Page 1/1. Even though it was just one photo, it was enough for Qin Yiru's imagination to roam. Even Qin Yiru's face flushed at the sight of it, despite her shrewd countenance. Yuan, you can't fold photos randomly. The little girl frowned as she looked at the family photo. Because the little girl folded the photo, Ce and Yunjian's lips kissed. She seemed to understand what this meant. Qin Yiru was afraid that these children would mature early, so she quickly walked over and tried to snatch the photo from the little girl's hands. Papa, Mama, Papa. Mama, Papa. Papa. Ya. The little girl frowned. Her two small hands, which were as small as a mature adult's finger, grabbed the photo tightly and refused to let go. Papa was the word for mother-in-law, which was not pronounced properly. She was calling Qin Yiru. The little girl seemed to want to express something. Since the little girl's hands were small and tender, Qin Yiru did not dare to use too much force. Hence, she was unable to pull the photo out of the little girl's hands. She gave up helplessly. Fortunately, there were no sensible children or adults around. Otherwise, she would have been embarrassed to death. Kiss kiss, kiss kiss. The little girl was having a lot of fun folding the photo. In the end, sleepiness overwhelmed her. When the little girl fell asleep, she hugged the photo that was folded to show Ce's thin lips kissing Yunjian's red lips and fell asleep. Qin Yiru took this opportunity to gently take the photo out of the little girl's hands. Then, she put it together with the stack of photos on the ground and hid it. When the little boy saw Qin Yiru leave, he looked left and right. Suddenly, he crawled in front of the little girl and lowered his head. He imitated the way Ce usually kissed Yunjian. He kissed the little girl's forehead and giggled again. Back at the scene in N country, the group planned to break through the N country's border troops. Yunjian, wait for me. Let's plan how to sneak in and assassinate him. Lu Yinue caught up with Yunjian and asked. When Lu Yinue said this, her voice was extremely soft. The people in the vicinity were all from N nation. During the riot, the N nation's treatment of the Z nation's people could not be described with the word reckless. If the two of them were discovered, they could even predict what would happen to them. She would become the plaything of tens of thousands of men. Her body and mind would be destroyed, and she would die. The army's camp is just ahead. Wait for me outside and don't come in. Yunjian only left Lu Yinue with this sentence and walked forward. Hey, you, hearing this, Lu Yinue walked over and grabbed Yunjian's arm. It's too dangerous for you to go alone. Let's go together. Yunjian blinked. She wanted to refuse, but after thinking about it, she said, the military camp stationed here is very large. It can be divided into the East and West military camps. The head of the military camp is in the East military camp. If you want to think of a way to attract most of the people from the East and West military camps to the West military camp. 10 minutes will do. After saying this, Yunjian did not wait for Lu Yinue's reply and left in a flash. The technology in N country was not advanced, and there were no cameras in the military camp. It was already very impressive to have a camera here. Yunjian had already found the head of the military camp. It was a huge open space. There were countless stars in the sky. In this open space, there were many naked women and girls lying on the ground. Moan. Why aren't you moaning? B*TCH. Move your hips. F*CK. This was simply a scene of promiscuity. Countless N nation people were riding on top of the women and girls who were obviously captured from Z nation. They were doing extremely disgusting things. One of the N nation people rammed into the motionless body of a woman whose mouth was full of blood. The woman did not make a sound. The N nation person pulled out a knife and stabbed the woman who had no desire to live to death. He was still speaking in N nation's language. B*TCH, if you don't listen, I'll kill you. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Chapter 2538. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. There was no despair, only more despair. The group of women at the scene were all motionless. They had lost all hope in life. Some of them had witnessed their husbands being killed by the N Nation people a few months ago. Their families were all killed. This was the result of staying in a country where the law was not perfect and there was a sudden riot. Between men and women, the men were killed on the spot. As for the women, after experiencing physical despair, they were tortured to death by this group of people. There were some courageous women who had committed suicide long before they were humiliated. When Yun Jian arrived at the scene, this was the scene she saw. The disobedient woman who was stabbed to death by the N Nation person groaned and died with her eyes wide open. She died with her eyes wide open. Damn bitch. F***ck, how dare you stare at me? Stare at me. I'm going to kill you. The N Nation person did not like the dead woman. He panicked, but he stabbed the woman's eyeball with the blade and gouged it out in front of everyone. You could never imagine what kind of cruel things a citizen of a country without law could do. The dozens of women at the scene were suffering a fate worse than death. Some of them were even tied up and could not even commit suicide. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. At this moment, she was standing at the top of the roof, looking forward. In her hands, there were two butterfly knives that gleamed with the light of the sword. Yun Jian did not think that Lu Yinue would help. So, she held the butterfly knives and found the target. He was also riding on a woman like the N Nation people. Just as she was about to attack, someone is invading from the west. Requesting backup. Requesting backup. A loud voice was heard. However, a man from country N rushed in and shouted loudly. Hearing this, the N Nation people around quickly put on their clothes and ran out. Only the leader was still riding on a woman and was in the final sprint. The rest of the women were all lying on the ground as if they were paralyzed. They had lost all hope of survival. Roar, roar, roar. The leader was as fat as a pig. He rammed into a woman and was in the final sprint. Just as the leader was about to end this wave of ramming, he suddenly heard a cold voice behind him. Are you ready to pay for what you've done? The sudden voice stunned the leader. He turned around like a robot. He thought it was the woman lying on the ground who wanted to attack him. Just as he was about to shout for the rest of his men to protect him, he saw an unfamiliar face. Yun Jian's slender figure was wrapped in a tight black shirt and pants. The butterfly knives on both her hands were facing down with fresh blood dripping from the blades. Her nonchalant expression made her look like a killer. The leader saw that the group of subordinates who were supposed to protect him were all lying in a pool of blood without making a single sound. You. The leader wanted to get out of the woman's body and escape, but he did not. In the next second, the blade in Yun Jian's hand had already cut his throat. At the same time, a sentence that made the leader completely sink into oblivion was suddenly heard. Don't worry. You go to hell first. Soon, I will send all your men to accompany you. Top reading site, M. Chapter 2539. Her words were so calm that it was as if she hadn't said anything. However, as soon as she finished speaking, the leader's eyes widened and he fell to the ground with a thud. His pupils didn't open or close for a long time. Obviously, Yun Jian's words made him die with his eyes wide open. This was his military camp. To him, without the military camp, it was equivalent to having nothing. Even his achievements after death would be reduced to nothing. Mission accomplished. Yun Jian took out her handkerchief and wiped the blood on the two butterfly knives gently as she spoke faintly, no one knowing who she was talking to. The next second, she glanced at the scene and said to the dozens of women lying on the ground, "You have 5 minutes left. Leave from the rear. You can directly escape from N country and cross the border of N country. There will be a national team outside to rescue you. Yun Jian's words made the dozens of women lying on the ground all turn to look at her. Yun Jian's eyes were glued to her 2 butterfly knives as she added with a curl of her red lips, "That's right, I'm not sure. I've already killed everyone here. Don't worry, you won't meet any country people when you escape." As soon as she finished speaking, the group of women lying on the ground all got up from the ground and swarmed in the direction Yun Jian pointed. Yun Jian suddenly smiled. The next second, she took out the dagger that she picked up from the hiding place not long ago. When she turned around, the dagger in her hand flew towards the only surveillance camera in the dark before she turned around. With a poof, the surveillance camera was destroyed. Her red arc rose as she sneered, "What an eyesore." After meeting up with Lu Yinue outside the military camp, the 2 of them returned to the hiding place. After returning to the hiding place, everyone asked about Yun Jian and Lu Yinue. When they heard that the leader of the target military camp had been killed, the military camp was leaderless and began to fall into chaos. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They just had to wait for the military camp to fall into chaos tomorrow. Yun Jian's people would break through the border and take advantage of this opportunity to escape. After falling asleep in the early morning, Yun Jian opened her eyes a few hours later. It was dawn. Big news, big news. I snuck out just now and heard about something big on the streets of N country. At this moment, a special forces soldier ran back with a black and white newspaper in his hand. "This is the newspaper I got from another country. It says that a woman suspected to be the #1 secret agent in China, slaying God, appeared at the military camp where Lu Yinue and Yun Jian sneaked in yesterday. This is the woman's back view recorded by the surveillance camera. After this back view was leaked, I heard that it's exactly the same as slaying God's back view in the hands of a world-renowned photographer from a Western country who loves photography and is the only one confirmed to be the #1 on the international secret agent chart. So, we can further speculate that the woman who appeared in the military camp yesterday might be slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking." The special forces soldier held the newspaper in his hand and shouted in panic. As he spoke, he even showed the ambiguous photo printed on the newspaper to everyone. It was so ambiguous that no one could tell whether the person was a man or a woman. "Yinue, Yun Jian, did the both of you see someone else in the military camp last night? I'm afraid that person is the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, slaying God." The special forces soldier exclaimed in surprise. Upon hearing that, everyone turned to look at Yun Jian and Lu Yinue. Just as everyone shifted their attention to Yun Jian and Lu Yinue, someone suddenly looked at the back of the person in the newspaper and pointed a finger at Lu Yinue, exclaiming in shock, "That's right. This back view, why is it exactly the same as Yun Jian's outfit yesterday?" Chapter 2540. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. As soon as the person spoke, everyone shifted their attention to Yun Jian. Not far away, Yun Jian was only wearing a casual outfit. The outfit was neither baggy nor tight, it was just the right size. Yun Jian hummed softly in response when she saw that everyone's attention was on her. She did not panic like the others had imagined, nor did she refute in haste like they had imagined her to do after hearing the question. Instead, she wiped the 2 butterfly knives in her hands gently, tossed them aside, and put them back at her waist. "Yun Jian, which outfit were you wearing yesterday?" Someone asked Yun Jian with a slightly agitated tone as if he had just discovered a secret. If Yun Jian was really slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent leaderboard, she should have some reaction after being questioned, right? However, everyone saw that Yun Jian was the first to walk out of the hideout after putting the 2 butterfly knives back at her waist. Halfway through, she glanced sideways and suddenly spoke to the crowd. "The outfit I wore yesterday is over there. I'll give you guys 10 minutes to gather at the entrance. I won't wait for anyone who's late." As soon as she finished speaking, Yun Jian walked out of the hideout. Everyone knew what Yun Jian meant when she said, "I won't wait for anyone who's late." If they were late, they would not be part of the escape plan this time. Therefore, everyone dared not be careless. However, before they walked out, the middle-aged man with glasses, who was He-Wan, was the first to rush forward and hold up the tight-fitting outfit Yun Jian wore yesterday. He compared the tight-fitting outfit Yun Jian wore yesterday with the back view in the newspaper. Everyone's eyes widened at that moment. Yun Jian waited for 3 minutes in the hideout before everyone came out one after another. "Looks like we've misunderstood. You're not slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent Leaderboard." A middle-aged man who walked out first smiled at Yun Jian awkwardly. "You almost scared me, but the style of the outfit is completely different. Also, I remember that Yun Jian wore an outfit without any accessories at the back." Zhang Meili walked over and said, "This farce would end here." At that moment, Yun Jian stood in front of everyone with her red lips pursed. She did not make a sound. She seemed to have expected this outcome as there was no joy or worry on her face. The outfit was an assembled one, the accessories on the outfit could be removed at any time. Otherwise, Yun Jian would not have allowed the security camera to capture her. Boom. 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 A series of gunshots were heard from afar. It was obvious that Yun Jian's men were already engaged in battle with the assassins of the leader yesterday. Yun Jian led a group of people to hide in the tall bushes. "Listen to my orders and wait for the right time. When I say run, no one is allowed to turn back. Charge forward with all your might. I'll tell you to run when the damage is at its lowest." Yun Jian's gentle reminder was quickly drowned out by the sound of explosions and gunshots. Everyone nodded in unison. If one were to observe carefully, one would notice that the refugees from Country Z were crossing their arms. Everyone knew that this was the key to their survival. It was the entrance to hell. If they could escape, they would live. If they could not, they would die. Just when everyone's hearts were clenched tightly and they could not breathe, Captain Zhang Heng glanced at Yun Jian's men bombarding the enemy from afar. Then, he looked at Yun Jian and asked Yun Jian under everyone's watchful eyes, "How do your men possess such powerful firearms? The battle has been going on for almost 30 minutes. This level of firepower is comparable to an underdeveloped country. As far as I know, only the underground organizations in the world have such terrifying firepower." Top reading website, M. Chapter 2541. There was nothing wrong with Zhang Heng's words. Some small countries that were not developed, or even dependent on other countries, could not even produce such firearms. Talents were also needed for the production of firearms. Some countries did not even have such talents. They could not produce all kinds of firearms and ammunition in their own country, so they had to buy them from other countries. How could such a country be powerful? On the other hand, Yun Jian's people had so many firearms. This was not something an ordinary person could have. Have you heard of a saying? Yun Jian did not answer Zhang Heng directly. She said, "What saying?" Zhang Heng had a weed in his mouth and a hat made of weeds on his head as he retorted, "The less you know, the longer you live. Or do you choose to die now?" Yun Jian's words came right after the sound of the sky-shaking cannon. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, but it reached everyone's ears. "I still want to live for a few more years." Zhang Heng spat out the weed in his mouth and laughed. He did not press her further. Everyone around them was worried about their own safety. At this juncture, although Yun Jian and Zhang Heng's conversation was very interesting, their own safety was more precious. "In a while, you will bring some people to cover them. Now, give me all your sniper rifles." Yun Jian spoke again after Zhang Heng finished his sentence in a joking manner. What do you want to do? Zhang Heng asked again. As he asked, he also asked his men to give all their sniper rifles to Yun Jian. Zhang Heng felt that talking to Yun Jian was not like talking to a 19-year-old rookie in the special forces. Instead, it was like talking to a powerful veteran who had been on the battlefield for many years. Yun Jian did not reply to Zhang Heng's question. After all, the army stationed at the border had been stationed here for many years and was familiar with the terrain. It was not easy to kill them in a short period of time. For Mu Ying, who was far away in Country Z, what was happening here was a completely different world. Perhaps from the moment Mu Ying died for Yun Jian in the Han organization, she and Yun Jian were destined to never return to how they used to be. Mu Ying's own physical body had actually disappeared from this world. Her consciousness had been extracted by a perverted doctor and forcefully stuffed into her current body. When Yun Jian found her and brought the mad dragon to her side, Mu Ying had already accepted the mad dragon. But recently, Mu Ying found that she often fainted suddenly. That feeling was the same as when she had died. In the past 2 days, she had suddenly fainted 5 times. Moreover, the frequency of her fainting had increased recently. Mu Ying suddenly realized that before that perverted doctor had passed away, he had said that if it weren't for the unique potion he had invented to maintain her current state, her current physical body could push out her soul at any time. When the physical body completely pushed out the soul, she would, in a sense, die again. Before that perverted doctor died, he had said that this situation would usually occur 20 years after she had merged with her physical body. But now, could it be that it had been brought forward? So Mu Ying had closed her door and refused to see anyone for the past 2 days. Even when Mad Dragon came to find her, she had used all kinds of excuses. In the end, Mu Ying pinched her knuckles until her knuckles turned white. Then, she typed a text message on her phone and sent it out. Don't come looking for me again. There was no reason. But less than 10 minutes after this text message was sent. Bang! The floor-to-ceiling window in Mu Ying's room suddenly made a crisp sound. In an instant, a tall man dressed in black used his body to directly break through the window and jumped in. Chapter 2542. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1, she had no choice but to send that message to Mad Dragon. But Mu Ying didn't expect Mad Dragon to be loitering around her house. She also didn't expect that he wouldn't reply to her message. Instead, he would break through the floor-to-ceiling window and barge in. Mu Ying had no doubts about Mad Dragon's strength. But she didn't want to see him anymore. Why did he come looking for her? Mu Ying was originally sitting on her bed. When she saw Kuang Long walking towards her with a face full of hostility, she almost instinctively got up from the bed and ran towards the door. She tried to break through the door. She couldn't let Mad Dragon know that she didn't have long to live. She also couldn't drag him down, but just as Mu Ying's hand reached out to open the door to her room, her hand was tightly grasped by a large hand. Mad Dragon, like Yun Jian and Shen Ji, was always at the top of the world. His whole body emitted a ruthless aura of blood. It felt like he could kill someone at any time. Mu Ying knew that Mad Dragon wouldn't do anything to her. But when she thought of her body's condition and felt his ruthless aura, she panicked even more. Let go of me, let go. Or I won't talk to you anymore. Mu Ying desperately tried to pull her hand away from Mad Dragon's grip. My little fool, where are you going? Mad Dragon was still the same as before, showing a gentle smile. But this gentle smile, which was like a gentleman's smile, contained a murderous aura that outsiders couldn't feel. It wasn't that he wanted to kill Mu Ying. It was that Mad Dragon was an assassin. His words and actions couldn't be separated from the murderous aura of an assassin. This uncontrollable ruthless aura made Mu Ying panic even more. Darling, you came looking for me? I've missed you for a long time. Mooing knew that Mad Dragon would not give up. She rolled her eyes and hugged Mad Dragon, pressing her cheek against Mad Dragon's chest as if nothing had happened. After hearing Mu Ying's words, Mad Dragon grabbed her wrist and stopped pretending. "You want to get rid of me?" When Mooing heard Mad Dragon's words, she couldn't help but take a deep breath. Her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. She swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears in her eyes. Then, Mooing Gao raised her head and cast a sidelong glance at Mad Dragon with disdain. "Yes, my parents have already arranged a blind date for me. Don't come looking for me in the future. You are an assassin. Although you are powerful, an assassin like you can face death at any time. If you die, won't I become a widow? So I thought about it and decided that you shouldn't come looking for me in the future." As she spoke, Mooing glanced to the side. After she finished speaking, she added, "I was just playing with you before. Moreover, I needed someone to protect me. Did you really take it seriously?" After saying this, Mooing caught a glimpse of anger in Mad Dragon's eyes. And ruthlessness. Mooing wasn't the first to see Mad Dragon's expression, but when she saw Mad Dragon's expression, she still took a deep breath. Just as Mu Ying's eyes were rolling back and forth, Mad Dragon suddenly stared at her. The next second, his hand suddenly grabbed Mu Ying's neck and lifted Mooing off the ground. Then, with a bloodthirsty look, he said, "I won't allow betrayal. You are my woman, and you want to betray my feelings. Then I'll have to kill you and go to hell with you. Even if I die, I want to be with you. You can only have me in your life." Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Chapter 2543. Mad Dragon's words reeked of blood, and every time he opened his mouth, it was death. Mad Dragon was different from Snow Eagle, Adam, Mo Sun, and Lin Wei. He was like Yun Jian and Shen Ji, someone who had been caught and sent to the organization for life and death training. Later on, when he became an assassin, he was instilled with the same philosophy. If you can't have it, then destroy it. Even if you destroy what's yours, you can't let anyone take it away. As for Mooing, Mad Dragon knew that she was very special. She was so special that he wanted to keep her in his arms and not let her leave his side. When they were dating, Mad Dragon would sneak to Mu Ying's balcony at night to watch her when it was quiet. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't want to scare Mooing, Mad Dragon would have kept Mooing within his reach and not let anyone touch her. Today, Mad Dragon didn't go on an assassination mission. When he asked to see Mooing, he was rejected by Mooing several times, so he lingered around Mu Ying's house. When he saw the text message Mooing sent him, Mad Dragon was on the verge of breaking down. Therefore, he didn't even think about it. He didn't even have the patience to open the floor-to-ceiling window. He used his brute body to directly rush in from the outside. After hearing Mu Ying's words, Mad Dragon couldn't accept it. He couldn't accept that the woman he loved was with another man. If there was such a day, he would definitely kill her before it happened, and he would follow her to the afterlife. Cough, 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 cough. Mu Ying's neck was choked by Mad Dragon. She coughed violently, her cheeks red. This scene reminded Mad Dragon of the ignorant little girl he had met in the Enhun organization. Mooing was completely different from when she was in Enhun, because Mu Ying's body was already dead. But to Mad Dragon, no matter what Mooing had become, he would still love her from the bottom of his heart. He still remembered that when he first joined Enhun, he was bullied by a group of boys who were considered strong among the children. At that time, Mad Dragon was covered in wounds, but he didn't utter a single word of pain. He had already given up on survival. It was a rainy day. In the cement field, he was beaten until his whole body was covered in wounds. He fell into the cement ditch and had already given up on living. "Why are you lying here? You'll catch a cold. Get up." At that time, Mooing was still young, but she was very sensible and obedient. When she saw Mad Dragon lying in the cement ditch, she rushed out to help Mad Dragon up. At that time, Mad Dragon was beaten up because the group of children wanted to steal his food and he refused. When Muing heard that he hadn't eaten for 3 days, she ran back to give him her dinner, a little bit of millet porridge. That was the first time Mad Dragon felt the warmth of another person. From then on, Mad Dragon swore that he would grow up and become strong enough to protect her. But Muing still died. From then on, Mad Dragon was completely useless and became a killing machine. He began to kill endlessly. Until he met Muing again. It could be said that to Mad Dragon, Muing was his spiritual support. Without her, his existence had no meaning. So when he heard that Muing was going to leave him, Mad Dragon completely lost control. Mad Dragon only let go of Muing when she was about to pass out. He blinked his sharp eyes fiercely. In the next second, he threw Muing onto the bed and pressed himself on top of her. Since you've chosen to die, I'll let you experience what it's like to be a woman before you die. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2544. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Mad Dragon's bloodthirsty and sinister voice sounded, as if he would turn into a vampire and bite off her neck if the person under him showed any signs of resistance. Muing was thrown onto the bed by Mad Dragon. Her hands, which were struggling slightly, stopped struggling after hearing Mad Dragon's words. She was about to die anyway. If he could get some peace of mind by taking her body, she would give it to him. At the border of N country, near the battlefield, Yun Jian and a group of people were still hiding there. At this moment, everyone was focused on the battlefield in front of them. Everyone knew that this time, it would be the key that would determine their life and death. Once Yun Jian gave the order, they would run away without looking back. At this moment, they were waiting for the right opportunity. Captain Zhang, are you ready? Yun Jian squatted in the grass and glanced at Zhang Heng from the corner of her eye as she asked softly. My men and I are always ready. After I send them safely away from the border, I will rush back with my men. Yun Jian, sorry for the trouble. Zhang Heng replied to Yun Jian. Yun Jian smiled when she heard this. When the people around them heard the conversation between Yun Jian and Zhang Heng, they already had a hunch that Yun Jian was about to give the order to run. Sure enough, in less than 3 minutes, a melodious female voice suddenly rang out, "Run!" Everyone ran in the direction they had agreed on earlier, afraid that they would lose their lives if they were too slow. The army of N country stationed at the border was almost wiped out by Yun Jian's men. But even so, there were still about 100 people. Seeing a group of refugees from Z country trying to escape, the group of N country people carried their guns and tried to stop them. Everything went according to Yun Jian's plan. When the number of N country people stationed here was the lowest, the refugees ran towards the border. In less than 3 minutes, N country's reinforcements arrived at the scene. At this time, the refugees were still not completely out of danger. Use the cannons. Blast them to death. None of the Z citizens are allowed to escape from country N. Blast them to death. Seeing that most of the N nation troops stationed here had been wiped out, the leader of the reinforcements who had rushed over roared furiously. Following that, more than 10 cannons were deployed in a formation. There was only 1 minute left. In just 1 minute, the refugees from Z country who had escaped from the danger zone would be free. The reinforcements from country N who had rushed over were unable to catch up with the hundreds of refugees who were about to escape from country N. However, if more than 10 cannons were to bombard them simultaneously, the refugees would still die. Oh no! Everyone, run! Run! Don't look back! Zhang Heng had already realized that something was wrong. With more than a dozen cannons firing at the same time, even if Yun Jian was there, she wouldn't be able to buy them the last minute to escape. Because she, Yun Jian, was all alone. No matter how fast one could use a sniper rifle and aim accurately, the sniper rifle still needed to be reloaded. After sniping the more than 10 N-nation people who were operating the cannons, there would still be more people to fill in. Unless Yun Jian had 3 heads and 6 arms, or a machine gun that could fire hundreds of bullets in succession, the refugees would all die on the spot. It was over. Other than the refugees, the special forces who were covering the rear all realized that this was a hopeless situation. However, they still followed the plan that they had previously agreed on. Not a single one of them fled at the last minute for their own sake. It was a pity that they didn't have the time to return to the embrace of their motherland and say goodbye to their family and friends, just as all the special forces and the female military doctor, Zhang Meili, Wang Xiaofan, and the others who were hiding in the mountains a few hundred meters away from here and didn't leave country N with them all thought so. More than 10 N-nation people had already stepped forward, intending to operate the cannons to give the refugees and the special forces who were covering them the final blow. Tut 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 tut. Just as everyone realized that it was hopeless, a series of sniper gunshots rang out one after another. The moment the gunshots rang out, the N-nation people who were about to step forward to open fire were killed one after another. Everyone suddenly widened their eyes in horror. One had to know that Yun Jian was only holding a sniper rifle. A sniper rifle could only shoot in bursts and couldn't fire bullets in succession. However, the bullets fired from the sniper rifle were like a machine gun's continuous firing. Just as everyone turned their heads to look in surprise as they ran, they saw Yun Jian in the distance holding more than 10 sniper rifles that she had taken from Zhang Heng. She didn't even focus on the sniper spot. She carried both sniper rifles with both hands and killed the N-nation people who were about to step forward to open fire with one shot. Every lift and shot was accurate. After firing a few rounds of the sniper rifle, she picked up the other one. Her movements were so fast that there were no flaws. She used the sniper rifle's bursts to unleash the continuous firing of a machine gun. Who else in this world could do that? She was probably the best person in the world to use a gun. Top reading website, M. Chapter 2545. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1, Run. Run. You'll be safe once you're out of country N. You can go home. Go back to your country. Run. Zhang Heng turned his head as he ran. His face was filled with joy when he saw this scene. In order to encourage the refugees to retreat as quickly as possible, he shouted in the smoke-filled battlefield. His voice was so loud that it almost broke his throat. However, Zhang Heng's face was filled with joy. They had safely sent the refugees out of country N's borders. These hundreds of refugees could finally go home. Walk another 100 meters and someone will come to your aid. The people of country N aren't stupid enough to chase us out of their own borders. Goodbye. After Zhang Heng said this to the refugees, he raised the rifle in his hand and turned to the special forces soldiers standing beside him. Brothers, it's time to charge over with me. He told Zhang Heng and the others that the refugees were the most worried. The refugees didn't have the ability to protect themselves. This was equivalent to giving Zhang Heng and the others someone to worry about. Now, there was no one behind them that they needed to protect. This meant that they could go all out. They would let the people of country N witness the strength of the special forces of country Z. Charge. Charge, let's fight it out with those bastards of country N. Wang Xiaofan, Zhang Meili, and the other female military doctors weren't arranged to return to their country. They were currently on a mountain and observing the scene. They had taken in Yun Jian's awe-inspiring performance just now. Other than being shocked, Wang Xiaofan, Zhang Xueli, and the rest of the girls were also astounded. Yun Jian was actually so adept at using a sniper rifle like a machine gun. She even saved the refugees, Zhang Heng, and the others all by herself. After they recovered from their shock, Zhang Heng and the other special forces soldiers had already rushed back. The reinforcements from Country N were greatly weakened and gave up the chase. After Zhang Heng met up with Zhang Meili, Wang Xiaofan, and the others, Yun Jian easily carried over a dozen sniper rifles that she had borrowed from Zhang Heng. "Your guns." Yun Jian threw a dozen sniper rifles on the ground and said indifferently. At this time, Zhang Meili couldn't help but ask Yun Jian, "Didn't you say that there's a 50% chance of survival if we escape with them? This time, neither our men nor their men were sacrificed. Could it be that your previous estimate was? The survival rate is too high. They don't have any awareness of danger, so maybe they don't even have a 50% chance of survival." Yun Jian only raised her red arc and said. With that, she turned around and glanced at Zhang Heng and the others. "Thank you for your guns. The quality of the guns still needs to be improved, but they're still suitable for use." If it was a normal person, after borrowing Zhang Heng's things and returning them with a word of thanks, they would definitely be grateful. But who would have thought that Yun Jian would say that the quality of Zhang Heng's guns could be improved after thanking them? What a strange and mysterious girl. Zhang Heng shook his head and was slightly stunned. Then, he remembered that Yun Jian's men hadn't entered Country N yet. "Yun Jian, where are your men? Why haven't I seen them enter Country N?" Zhang Heng asked hurriedly. "They've already gone to the final battlefield." Yun Jian stopped in her tracks and said indifferently. After sending off this batch of refugees, there was still the last batch of refugees. The habitat of that batch of refugees was the place where Yu Xiaoluo had lost his life. That was where the real Country N troops were heavily guarding. After breaking through them and rescuing the last batch of refugees from Country Z who were still alive, this mission would be considered complete. But at the same time, breaking through there was more than 20 times more difficult than sending off this batch of refugees today. Just as Yun Jian finished speaking, Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, Wang Xiaofan, Zhang Meili, and the others were stunned. They saw Yun Jian put on a pair of gloves that she had taken out from somewhere and turned around. Under her bangs, her slightly raised eyes were as sharp as a blade. Her lips curled up, and in front of everyone, she said something that made everyone's hearts tremble. "Get ready to go to the final battlefield with me. No mission that I've set out has ever been completed in more than 5 days. This time is no exception." Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2546. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation. Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. A total of 109 people, page 1/1, this sentence was arrogant. Any mission. Sometimes, a mission could be an espionage mission. For example, Yun Jian and her team had disguised themselves as ordinary people to infiltrate the target's side as spies. Usually, spies would need a few years of incubation. They would also need to gain the target's trust. When the target let down their guard and treated them as someone they could trust, they would seize the opportunity to get hold of the target's weakness and wipe them out completely. Assassination was not the only type of mission in this world. For some missions, success or failure could be seen in a few days. But for some missions, like AIDS, there was an incubation period. It would take years or even decades to complete a mission. Be it a few days, a few years, or even decades, it was considered normal to complete a mission, but Yun Jian had never taken more than 5 days to complete it. Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, Zhang Meili, Wang Xiaofan, and the others were dumbfounded when they heard her. By the time they recovered from their shock, Yun Jian was already far away. "What are you waiting for?" It was only when they heard Yun Jian's voice that they snapped back to reality and ran after her. "Aha, what AF * King comfortable sleep. 006, where did you run off to?" I couldn't find you anywhere, Shen Ji yawned loudly and told Yun Jian when he saw Yun Jian returning with Zhang Hang and the others. Gu Junjian did not participate in the cover earlier as he was called by Yun Jian to investigate the location of the final battlefield. Gu Junjian had returned as well. Seeing Yun Jian, Gu Junjian hurried over and said, "Xiao Jian, your men have gone ahead. We're going to, let's go together," Yun Jian said with a nonchalant gaze as she pushed Shen Ji who was still yawning away. In the end, they came to the final battlefield. There were 10,000 Country Z refugees trapped there. More than 1,000 Special Forces soldiers disguised as ordinary people had been sent to rescue them. Yu Xiaoluo was reported to have been killed there. Now, Gu Junjian and his men were unable to contact more than 10,000 refugees from Z country who were trapped there, as well as more than 1,000 Special Forces soldiers who were sent to rescue them. The battlefield is right in front of us. It said that the enemy has 30,000 people. This is the information we got from the last exchange with the people trapped inside. Take a look. Zhang Heng took out a draft map and handed it to Yun Jian and the others. Zhang Heng and his men didn't know how many people Yun Jian had, nor did they know how good their weapons were. There were only a few dozen of them here. It was definitely unrealistic for them to rescue more than 10,000 people and fight against more than 30,000 people from N country. Now, it was time to see how many people Yun Jian had. The sketch that Zhang Heng gave him depicted the current situation with simple gestures. To put it simply, the refugees and the special forces were trapped in several rows of empty buildings. On the outside, they were surrounded by Country N's 30,000 troops. Fortunately, the 30,000 people from N country were ordinary people and not soldiers. Most of the weapons in their hands were iron rods, wooden sticks, and occasionally firearms. However, they were definitely not as good as the Special Forces soldiers who had undergone formal training. Therefore, the 30,000 people from N country had surrounded the 10,000 refugees from Z country and more than 1,000 Special Forces soldiers in a large circle. Yun Jian, how many people do you have? Zhang Heng asked an important question at this time. From the scene of the battle at the border just now, Yun Jian should have at least 10,000 people. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't have such a powerful ability. Although he didn't know how Yun Jian summoned these people, now was not the time to think about it. However, just as Zhang Heng asked this question and everyone thought that Yun Jian would count her people by the tens of thousands, she said something in front of everyone that made everyone speechless. No more, no less, a total of 109 people. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2547. According to the battle between the two sides just now, Yun Jian's people had defeated thousands of N-nation soldiers stationed at the border with ease. She should have had tens of thousands of people to do it. But what did they hear? Really? 109 people? Yun Jian, you're not joking, are you? Dan Zhengyu was stunned on the spot. He, who was usually calm and steady, was no longer calm. What kind of international joke was this? With 109 people, they easily wiped out thousands of N-nation soldiers stationed at the border. What? You're saying that on the battlefield just now, there were only 109 people who defeated N-nation's army and made them unable to fight back? Zhang Heng, who was usually calm and steady, was also stunned. What was even more shocking was, Yun Jian, are you planning to take these 109 people and a few dozen of us to fight against N-nation's 30,000 people? Zhang Heng immediately reacted and asked loudly. Do we still have a way out? We don't even have 200 people combined. N-nation has 30,000 people. If each of us spit a mouthful of saliva, we'll drown. Zhang Meili also asked at this time. Let's wait a few days. In 2 days, there will be reinforcements from the country coming to support us. We'll make our move then, Zhang Heng suggested. I've said before that I won't be out for more than 5 days. If you want to quit, I won't force you. Yun Jian didn't give anyone a chance to refute. She stepped forward, and her slender figure appeared in front of everyone. Just like that, she walked forward. Halfway through, she turned sideways and said to Gu Junjian, "Dad, what's your plan?" "I'll go with you," Gu Junjian said without hesitation. "Crazy, crazy. She's really crazy. Even if she was willful a few times before, that's fine. But now, she wants to fight against 30,000 people with only 100 people. Even if it's easy for 100 people to deal with a few thousand people at the border, this time, they have 30,000 people in their hands. She's obviously sending herself to her death." Wang Xuefei exclaimed in shock. Hearing this, everyone present was horrified. "You're the ones who are going to die." Shen Ji couldn't help but retort when she heard Wang Xuefei's words. With that, Shen Ji didn't wait for Wang Xuefei's reply. She walked over to Yun Jian. 006, this is the feeling I want. I have killed countless people in my life, but I have never saved anyone. Today, for you, I will help you save people. With that, Shen Ji paused. Just as everyone was moved by Shen Ji's touching words, a voice suddenly rang out. Shen Ji suddenly spoke to Yun Jian again. "After today, I will use my own strength to personally kill you. That way, I will be the most powerful person in the world." Ha ha ha. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Among the 30,000 people gathered from N Nation, there were also N Nation soldiers. At this moment, a few heads were hanging on the N Nation's flag that was hoisted high in the sky. That was the head of the Z Nation. Among the 30,000 people from N Nation, there was one person who was the leader. The leader wiped his teeth and said to his subordinates, "Take those heads and let them stand over there and kick them around like footballs. I want to see if those special forces soldiers still won't come out after being humiliated like this." At this moment, with a bang sound, a string of bullets suddenly flew by and directly pierced the head of the leader. Headshot. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2548. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1, Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Yun Jian, who had suddenly appeared in front of them and put away her sniper rifle. Their eyes widened and their faces turned pale. Just like that, the leader of the commoners that they had painstakingly chosen was killed without a sound. This little girl was definitely not a simple character. And she had also said, killing their leader was the first gift from the Wuxia mercenaries. Wuxia mercenaries? The internationally famous Wuxia mercenaries? A middle-aged man who was standing beside the 30,000 Nigerians leader who was shot in the head by Yun Jian exclaimed in shock. His legs were covered in thick black leg hair and his stomach was so big that even his short sleeves could not cover it. This middle-aged man with thick black leg hair was the subordinate of the leader who had been killed by Yun Jian. His name was Kalimantan. Kalimantan had followed the leader who had been killed by Yun Jian and bullied the Z people. He had organized the N people to gang rape women and humiliate the Z people. But in fact, Kalimantan had always wanted the position of the leader who had been killed by Yun Jian. At best, Kalimantan was only a staff officer under the leader. But now that the leader was dead, Kalimantan was grateful to Yun Jian. Of course, this gratitude only included not killing her. Little girl, have you heard of this saying? In times of war, who cares if you are a member of the Wuxia mercenaries? But since you have delivered yourself to us today, don't blame us for being rude. If you know what's good for you, you'd better come down yourself. We promise to torture you gently. As long as you serve us well, I promise you will not die, otherwise. Humph. Who cares if you are a member of the Wuxia mercenaries? We can't even protect ourselves now, who are you trying to scare? Kalimantan snorted a few times and stared at Yunjian's body, which was wrapped in tights and pants. Kalimantan's promise to keep you alive was already the biggest favor. For Kalimantan and the others, the Z women they caught were usually gang raped on the street and killed directly. Oh, this woman is quite stupid. She used the Kosha mercenaries to scare us. The Kosha mercenaries are indeed powerful. If it was in the past, I would be afraid of them. But she doesn't look at our situation now. Our country is going to die. Who cares if she is a Kosha mercenaries? I am not afraid of them. Unless they are like the legends, they are as rich as a country. Because they have the same military power as a powerful country. But this, is it possible? A person from N country standing next to Kalimantan also laughed happily, and his tone was full of sarcasm. Woman, come down quickly if you know what's good for you, otherwise you will suffer a fate worse than death later. I really want to have a taste of the women of the Kosha mercenaries. N country was in chaos. The two sides were at war. At this time, the country was already torn apart. For the N people, the Kosha mercenaries were not even able to protect themselves now. It was uncertain whether they could survive until tomorrow. So when they heard Yunjian's words, everyone was stunned. She was pretending. More than 10,000 Z people and more than 1,000 special forces were surrounded in rows of abandoned buildings by N country's 30,000 people. A scout who went to investigate nearby and found Yunjian quickly came back and reported the news to the leader of the more than 1,000 special forces. What? Only one person? And it's a woman. 2 days ago, our female special forces were sent out, and they were all humiliated to death like that. This time, I will definitely not let our Z people suffer the slightest bit of persecution. Brothers, follow me. When the leader heard the news, he was sitting on the ground with his eyes closed. At this moment, he stood up from the ground with a whoosh, set up a rifle and walked out. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2549. The scout was too far away and did not hear what Yunjian said clearly. However, he saw with his own eyes how Yunjian fired her sniper rifle and blew up the heads of 30,000 enemy soldiers. Captain, please wait a minute. If we go out now, what will happen to these 10,000 refugees? Every corner is guarded by the N nation people. If we bring people out, what if the N nation people take the opportunity to attack? Seeing that the captain was about to leave, the scout pulled him back and said with a bitter face. His words made the captain stop in his tracks. Yes, he could not joke around with the lives of these 10,000 refugees. Behind him were more than 10,000 refugees who needed to be protected. With a bang, the captain punched the wall and lowered his head in pain. Do I have to watch my fellow countrymen who came to rescue us be humiliated to death again? You saw how Comrade Lu Xiaofan died back then. Those bastards, they actually, the team leader couldn't bring himself to say the rest of the words. The special forces also knew how to feel heartache. They were people of flesh and blood. They were not emotionless machines. And Captain Lu and the rest. At this point, the captain had already grabbed his head and slowly squatted on the ground. When the others heard the captain's words, they did not say anything else. For the past few days, their people had been guarding nearby. Once the N nation people made a move, they would defend and prevent them from entering the temporary safe zone. However, there was no source of food. Therefore, the captain had to send people to secretly transport the food in. Comrade Lu Xiaofan, Captain Lu and the rest were caught by the N nation people when they were secretly transporting food. Captain Lu and the rest were beheaded on the spot. Only their heads were hung high on the N nation flag. As a female comrade, Lu Xiaofan was gang raped to death by thousands of N nation men. It was a great humiliation. As for you Xiaoluo, he was caught and beheaded when he was secretly transporting food with Captain Liu and the rest. That was all the news that the captain had heard. "Captain, we will leave some people here to defend. Team 1 will go out to rescue them. How about that?" Seeing the captain's pained expression, the special forces beside him did not feel good either. At this moment, a special forces soldier suggested, "Okay." The team leader grabbed the rifle and stood up. Just as the team leader was about to lead them out, one of the refugees who had heard the news, an elderly woman, walked over to stop him. "Captain Fan, you can't just leave us here. Captain is only saving people. He won't abandon you." The Special Forces soldier who was standing beside Captain Fan just now replied. "But, what if the people from N Nation rush in again?" The old woman led a group of people and refused to give way. "Captain Fan, I beg you. Don't go." Hearing the old woman's words, the group of refugees all knelt down in front of Captain Fan. In the face of life, what was dignity? No one ever cared. When people are in desperate straits, there are many selfish people. This is not rare. What was truly rare was a person who stood up and spoke for the sake of others in a desperate situation. Country Z, Mu Ying's house. Mad Dragon pinched Mu Ying's chin with one hand and quickly unbuckled his belt with the other. When he saw that Mu Ying was silent, his anger dissipated instantly. The next moment, he suddenly hugged Mu Ying, who was lying silently on the bed, and begged Mu Ying in the most belittling tone he had ever used in his life. "Ying, my silly girl, what's wrong with you? What happened, can you tell me? Let's solve it together. As long as you don't leave me, I will do anything you want. If you don't like my profession, then I will quit the assassin circle. If you don't like me, I can change. Just don't leave me." Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2550. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Mad Dragon's love for Mu Ying could be as cold as fire, or as low as dust. When he heard that Mu Ying wanted to leave him, his first instinct was to not let go. He did not want to force Mu Ying, but because of love. When you love someone to the extreme, you will go crazy. And Mad Dragon happened to be this kind of person. As long as he could keep Mu Ying from leaving him, he would do anything, give up anything. Mad Dragon was an unpredictable person to begin with. Mu Ying could feel that Mad Dragon did not want to kill her. She knew that ever since he stepped into the assassin circle, he had never been merciful to anyone. No one had ever managed to survive for more than 3 minutes after angering him. But towards Mu Ying, he endured it again and again. Mu Ying's tears flowed down. She suddenly stood up and hugged Mad Dragon. Tears flowed down her face. She could not help but say, "I'm sorry. I might die. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to make you suffer. Mu Ying said all the words in her heart in one breath. She thought that after breaking up with Mad Dragon would not be so sad after knowing that she was dead. But Mu Ying was wrong. She wanted to cherish the present. Hearing Mu Ying's words, Mad Dragon's face did not show any sadness. He touched Mu Ying's head, and said as usual, "So that's how it is, silly girl, I'm here, everything will be fine." "Will it really be fine? I'm afraid that if I really leave one day, you will be sad." Mu Ying looked up at Mad Dragon and said, "Yes, it will be fine." Mad Dragon touched Mu Ying's head. Mu Ying's heart skipped a beat. She hugged Mad Dragon back, and suddenly leaned over to kiss Mad Dragon's lips. Unlike the previous kisses, this kiss carried an unusual aura. Mad Dragon, who had peeped at her for her whole life, how could his beloved woman take the initiative to give him her body? He grabbed the tender skin, and both of them fell on the bed. After that, Mu Ying slept soundly. Mad Dragon looked at her one last time, and then turned and walked out. Africa, Moon City, in a run-down laboratory. A scientist in a Ph.D. robe was standing on a simple stool. He was looking at a handsome man standing in front of him. This handsome man was none other than Quang Long. "I can give you whatever you want, but please make your father's secret potion." Mad Dragon looked at the scientist in a doctor's robe and said, "Yo, look, who's this? Isn't this Mad Dragon Killer, my nemesis from a few years ago? Why are you here?" The scientist in his early 30s said with a gloomy face. This scientist was the son of the perverted Ph.D., who transferred Mu Ying's consciousness into this body. That perverted Ph.D. told his son all the secret recipes, including the secret recipe of the medicine. And that perverted Ph.D.'s son was Mad Dragon's nemesis from many years ago. "Cut the crap, give it to me or not." Mad Dragon clenched his fist and shouted. "That will depend on." The scientist stood up and walked up to the Mad Dragon. The next second, the scientist raised his leg, and kicked Mad Dragon to the ground in slow motion, and stepped on Mad Dragon's abdomen with one foot, slowly lowered his head, and continued with a gloomy tone, "Your sincerity." This man's strength was naturally far below Mad Dragon, but the moment he raised his leg, Mad Dragon clenched his fist and took the kick. Just after the scientist stepped on Mad Dragon to the ground, he suddenly slowly raised his leg again, and stepped on Mad Dragon's head, and laughed sinisterly, "Ha ha ha. I didn't expect you, Mad Dragon, to be in such a state for a woman. Ha ha ha." Top reading website, M. Chapter 2551. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 2552. The reason why the people of N Nation were not afraid of Yunjian or the Kosha mercenaries was that the Kosha mercenaries were no longer a threat to them. There were indeed international rumors that the military reserves of the Kosha mercenaries were comparable to that of a powerful country. And their wealth was comparable to that of a country. However, that was just a legend. Moreover, the N Nation was in chaos and they could not even protect themselves. It was still unknown whether they could survive until tomorrow. Who would care about the Kosha mercenaries? Moreover, what kind of military reserves could be comparable to that of a powerful country? What kind of wealth was comparable to that of a country? The Kosha mercenaries could send out assassins to carry out assassination missions. That was indeed impressive. However, they had 30,000 people. Why should they be afraid of the Kosha mercenaries? However, it was not until all the tall buildings that were temporarily occupied by the N Nation people collapsed in less than 3 minutes. Other than the surrounding area where the Z Nation refugees were located, the rest of the places were all bombed to the ground by gunfire that came out of nowhere. This truly posed a threat to their safety. This group of N Nation people who were originally fearless and did not even care about the Kosha mercenaries. Now, they were completely flustered. You. Kalimantan pointed at Yunjian with a trembling finger. His face looked as if he had eaten dog poop. Really. The Kosha mercenaries really have wealth comparable to that of a country. Their military reserves are comparable to that of a powerful country. That is not just a legend. A N Nation person standing next to Kalimantan was so scared that his lips and teeth were moving up and down, making a slight clattering sound. The reason why the Kosha mercenaries were feared was that in this peaceful country without war, the Kosha mercenaries' assassins and agents could quietly obliterate people. However, on the battlefield, the Kosha mercenaries were nothing to be afraid of. Unless the Kosha mercenaries had a military reserve comparable to that of a powerful country. Now, Yunjian had directly used her strength to let the N Nation people personally understand the authenticity of the legend. Retreat! The Kalimantan people retreated step by step while shouting at the N Nation people around them. As soon as Yunjian appeared, the leader of this group of 30,000 men was shot in the head by Yun Jian. Kalimantan was the only one who could give orders now. Do you think you can still escape? Kalimantan ordered his men to abandon Yushaoluo and a group of beaten Special Forces soldiers and was about to escape. Right in front of Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, Lu Yinue, Captain Fan, and the others who were dumbfounded, Yun Jian leaped easily from the 10-meter-high roof to the ground. After landing, she didn't even need to stabilize her footsteps. She raised her eyes and looked at Kalimantan's group from the corner of her eyes as she walked over with chilling footsteps. What do you mean by that? Kalimantan's heart tightened fiercely. He involuntarily took a big step back and asked Yun Jian. Although the surrounding area had been razed to the ground, there were still 30,000 people under him. Even if the surrounding high-rise buildings had all collapsed, the 30,000 people of N Nation couldn't all be in the high-rise buildings. There should be at least 20,000 people left. Literally. Yun Jian's lips curled into a faint smile that sent chills down one's spine. Everyone was surprised and puzzled by the meaning of Yun Jian's words. Kalimantan also frowned and was about to speak. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. A series of loud explosions that could shatter one's eardrums rang out again. In less than 3 minutes, a few N Nation people who were struggling to escape with the wounded ran to Kalimantan. With their eyes wide open, they looked as if they had just escaped death and shouted in front of everyone, "A group of people who came from nowhere attacked us with the world's most advanced weapons. Our 30,000 people. All of them were buried in the sea of fire in an instant." Chapter 2553. The 30,000 people who died in the fire were the ones who bullied women on the street, killed strong men from Z country, and kicked their heads around like basketballs. This group of crazy people who didn't need any sympathy or pity were the scum of society. What? 30,000 people all died in the fire in an instant. The first to react and shout was not Kalimantan, who was the leader of the 30,000 people from N country, but Zhang Heng. Captain Fan was startled by Zhang Heng's exclamation. Zhang Heng was a Special Forces soldier who came to support. Captain Fan knew Zhang Heng. So Captain Fan instinctively thought that Zhang Heng had brought reinforcements to save them. In spite of it, Zhang Heng's next words, pointing at Yun Jian, stunned Captain Fan and the rest of them. She had only sent 109 people. But these 109 people actually wiped out 30,000 people from N country. There were only 109 people, and no large-scale reinforcements. These 109 people wiped out 30,000 people from N country. This. Captain Fan's face froze. Even the people he brought with him were dumbfounded. 100 people against 30,000 people, and a total victory. This was simply 1 against 300. Was this even something a human could do? Who the hell is she? She's so powerful. One of Captain Fan's men looked at Yun Jian and sighed. But before Captain Fan, Zhang Heng, and the others could react, a large group of people suddenly surrounded them. One of them, a woman with an alluring figure who was dressed similarly to Yun Jian, walked over. 006, your team is not bad. These 109 people have been trained well by you. It's effortless to command them. Why don't you name a price and let me adopt your 109 people? The person who came was none other than Shenji. At this moment, Shenji raised her hand. Her slender hand brushed her long hair behind her ear. Like a graceful Buddha, she stood in front of everyone. Since Shenji had brought Yun Jian's 109 people to the crowd, it meant that other than Kalimantan and the few remaining N country people, the other 30,000 people had already died in the fire. Even if he didn't die, he would be trapped under a tall building. If no one came to save him, it meant that he was not far from death. Clearly, Yun Jian and Shenji didn't care about Kalimantan and the others at all. Give me all the savings you've accumulated over the years, and I'll consider giving him to you. At that moment, Yun Jian walked toward Shen Ji. She narrowed her eyes and spoke softly. You're too greedy. I don't want it anymore. Just wash your neck and wait for me to kill you. Shen Ji clicked her tongue. After that, she curled her lips and turned to leave. Quick! Hurry up and organize the refugees to leave. Captain Fan was very smart. Seeing this, he turned around and hurriedly ordered his men standing behind him. Yes. Captain. Captain Fan's men were overjoyed, and with the fastest speed in their lives, they turned around and ran towards the 10,000 refugees. Originally, in a few days, a large number of Z country's special forces would come to the rescue. But now that Yun Jian's men had solved this problem, it could be considered a great achievement. Otherwise, who knew how many innocent people and the special forces who had come to support N country would have lost their lives here. Kalimantan saw Shen Ji turn around and leave. He moved his feet lightly, wanting to take the opportunity to retreat. But just as Shen Ji turned around and walked away, she suddenly raised her hand and pointed the gun she had prepared at Kalimantan and the few remaining N country people. Bang! 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 Gunshots rang out. By the time everyone reacted, Shen Ji had already killed all the N country people. She put away her gun and looked at Yun Jian. 006, I helped you solve your last problem. You owe me a favor. I'll pay with your life in the future. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2554. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Yun Jian's lips curled into a smile as she replied to Shen Ji, that depends on whether you're alive to take it. Shen Ji wiped her pistol with a hand, as if she did not use it to kill Kalimantan and his men. She turned to wave at Yun Jian and left after a while. Yun Jian didn't even bat an eye at the death of Kalimantan and the others. Any normal girl would have been scared by such a scene. Yun Jian wasn't a normal girl, but as a Special Forces soldier, she wasn't shocked by Shen Ji's actions at all. It was as if they were used to death. Zhang Heng, Captain Fan and the others couldn't help but look at Yun Jian. You? Who are you? It was Captain Fan who asked Yun Jian in shock. She could even order the kosher mercenaries. Who was she? And that woman just now, what was her relationship with her? You can go now. Yun Jian didn't reply to Captain Fan immediately. Instead, she spoke to the 109 kosher mercenaries. In less than a minute, all 109 of them disappeared without a trace. Yun Jian took out a forged contract from her pocket, crumpled it into a ball and threw it in front of Captain Fan. Captain Fan was no slouch as he caught the ball of paper that Yun Jian tossed over with a raise of his hand. He opened the ball of paper and read it. So you hired the kosher mercenaries. You even used the name of the kosher mercenaries, no wonder. After reading the forged contract, Captain Fan heaved a sigh of relief. But those 109 people should be the elites of the kosher mercenaries. How much did you spend to hire them? I'll reimburse you later. Captain Fan asked Yun Jian. Captain Fan, Zhang Heng and the others were waiting for reinforcements to arrive in a few days and then save the refugees in one go. This way, sacrifices were inevitable. Now that Yun Jian had intervened, the number of sacrifices would be greatly reduced. This was a good thing for Captain Fan, Zhang Heng, and Z country. No need. Yun Jian didn't say anything else. She pursed her red lips and left the place first. Looking at Yun Jian's receding figure, Yu Xiaoluo, who was lying on the ground and almost breathed his last due to the N nation's torture, slowly closed his heavy eyes. Yu Xiaoluo's legs had been broken during the few days he had been captured by the N nation people. The N nation people had burned his skin to a crisp, and the flesh beneath his skin could be seen clearly. Yu Xiaoluo had also been subjected to many inhumane tortures over the past few days. Seeing Yun Jian's figure, Yu Xiaoluo, who had fainted, remembered the look on Yun Jian's face a few years when she said she owed a favor. He had thought that Yun Jian was just saying it for the sake of it. He didn't expect that she really. The refugees were finally rescued, and Yun Jian returned to Z country first. Gu Junjian was worried about Yu Xiaoluo, so he stayed behind to look after him. The days passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was the day before Yun Jian and Siyi's engagement party. The day before the engagement party, Yun Jian went to Hubble Island. This was a gorgeous pink beach made up of pink granules. Ciyi hadn't arrived yet, but the little girl and the little girl were already dressed in formal clothes. They looked very happy as they rolled around on the pink beach. From afar, Yun Jian saw Zhou Yiran running to the little girl who was rolling on the ground and handing her a flower. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2555. He plucked that flower during art class last week. He's been treating it like a treasure these past few days. He won't even let me, his mother, touch it. He actually gave it to your little girl. It's too hurtful. Lan Su had unknowingly walked to Yun Jian's side. She shook her head and looked at Zhou Yiran in the distance with a heartbroken expression. Although Zhou Yiran was only 4 years old, he had already gone to kindergarten early. He was very smart and understood at once. That flower looked like a real flower. When Yun Jian looked at the flower that Zhou Yiran handed to the little girl from a distance, she thought it was a real flower at first glance. After all, they were surrounded by the sea. There were many coconut trees by the sea, and there were no flowers around to pluck. Don't be sad. Yun Jian sat on a rocking chair on the beach, pursing her red lips and smiling. Lan Su thought that Yun Jian was going to say a few words of comfort. But Yun Jian's next sentence almost made Lan Su go crazy. You'll be even sadder in the future. In the distance, the little girl and the little guy were crawling on the pink beach. The little girl and the little guy were very sensible. Both of them knew that they couldn't run too far, let alone get close to the beach. At this moment, Zhou Yiran suddenly walked over and handed the little girl a flower. When the little guy saw it, he fiercely yelled at Zhou Yiran and reached out to snatch the flower. Taking advantage of his height and age, Zhou Yiran reached out and pushed the little fellow to the side. Then, he squatted down and took the little girl's hand. He gently placed the flower he had made into the little girl's hand. It's for you. Zhou Yiran opened his mouth clearly. Yaya? The little girl widened her eyes. Those eyes that seemed to be able to speak seemed to ask Zhou Yiran, is this really for me? Even if the little girl couldn't speak now. When Zhou Yiran saw this, as if he could talk to the little girl, he nodded and said, it's for you. Since you took my flower, you can only be my bride in the future. The little girl suddenly giggled. She didn't know what a bride was either. She grabbed the flower and played with it happily. She didn't know that someone had already reserved her life with a flower. Yaya. Chi chi chi. The little fellow was piled up by Zhou Yiran. Like a dead tortoise, he lay on the beach with his belly facing up. He didn't get up for a long time. He gritted his teeth and looked at Zhou Yiran with a fierce expression. When Yun Jian saw this from afar, she pursed her lips slightly with a blissful expression. At 7:00 in the evening, Qin Yiru organized a barbecue at the beach. The next day was the engagement banquet. Almost everyone had arrived. Everyone suggested that since they had nothing to do at night, they might as well hold a barbecue party here. Everyone was outside at this moment. Yun Jian saw that the little girl and the little fellow were being watched. She turned around and went back to the house, intending to take a bath. Ce was supposed to arrive in the wee hours of the morning. After returning to the rented seaside villa, Yun Jian reaches out to turn on the light in the living room. Suddenly, a slender large palm pressed down on her small hand. Another large palm came from behind Yun Jian and covered Yun Jian's mouth. The person who appeared out of nowhere pulled Yun Jian to the living room table and pushed Yun Jian onto the table that could be entered at any time. The person covered Yun Jian's mouth and pressed down on Yun Jian with a force that even Yun Jian could not resist, before leaning into her ear. The moment the familiar voice rang, Yun Jian felt her legs in a miniskirt being pressed down by the familiar figure in the dark villa living room and slowly parted. Xiao Jian. M. Chapter 2556. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1, Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation CE suddenly appeared and pinned Yun Jian on the big table in the middle of the living room of the seaside villa. A child's voice came from outside the house, which sounded like the sound of a drum in Yun Jian's ears. Mama Papa, Mama Papa. Brother, Mama Papa. Ayayaya. The childish voice of a child rang out. After all, she was the one who gave birth to the child. Needless to say, Yun Jian could tell that the childish voice with poor pronunciation came from the little girl's mouth. You said that your parents are in the house? Doesn't your father only arrive here in the wee hours of the morning? Following the little girl's babbling voice, a voice that was just as immature, but with an adult's accent, rang out. It was Zhou Ran who left the crowd with the little girl and ran out. Ayayaya. Mama Papa. Brother, Mama Papa. The little girl was easily carried by Zhou Ran and held by Zhou Ran's little fingers. Her other hand, which was so small that it was only half the size of Zhou Ran's, pointed at the door and pouted, as if she was certain that her parents were inside. All right, I'll take you to see them. Seeing that the little girl was still holding the flowers he gave her, Zhou Ran was helpless. He carried the little girl's small body and opened the door of the villa with his other hand. Zhou Ran had just opened the door of the villa with the little girl in his arms when he saw the center of the big living room of the seaside villa. The moment he opened the door and turned on the light switch, the two children saw, the tablecloth on the long dining table in the middle of the living room was in a mess, as if it had just been robbed. There was a floor-to-ceiling window in the distance, from which one could see the boundless sea, but someone had used a remote control to draw the curtains. Mama. Mama. Papa. Papa. Ha ha ha. The little girl suddenly clapped her hands. Zhou Ran himself was still young. He was only 4 years old. When the little girl clapped her hands, her body swayed. He almost couldn't hold the little girl steady, but in the end, he still comforted the little girl. There seems to be someone behind the curtains. Let's go over and take a look. Zhou Ran comforted the little girl and carried her over. It had to be said that Zhou Ran's perception was very sensitive. He carried the little girl and walked step by step towards the curtains in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Walking to the curtains of the floor-to-ceiling windows, he reached out with his free hand and pulled the curtains open. At this moment, two shadows flashed past the floor-to-ceiling window in front of them, creak, creak. Outside the window, 2 coconut trees were swaying in the wind. The two shadows that resembled humans turned out to be an illusion caused by the collision of the trunks of 2 coconut trees. Zhou Ran put down the curtains and carried the little girl out. The barbecue should be done. Let's go out and eat. Your parents shouldn't be at home. Ah. Papa, Mama, Yaya. Yaya. The little girl was unconvinced and called out again. The 4-year-old Zhou Ran reached out and rubbed the little girl's head. His face was clearly young, but it was slightly serious and steady as he said, "Wifey, be good." Yeah. It was as mysterious as a mystery. When the little girl heard Zhou Ran's words, she was originally noisy, but now, she really stopped making a fuss. Not long after, Zhou brought the little girl and left this place. Not long after Zhou left, Ce, who was hugging Yun Jian and hiding outside the floor-to-ceiling window, lowered her eyes and looked gloomy. Yun Jian pursed her red lips and chuckled softly. On the beach, Adam, who had picked up a mutton skewer and was about to eat, suddenly received a text message from Ce. There was only one simple and crude sentence in the text message: after attending the engagement party, immediately take your son and scram to the Amazon. You're not allowed to come back before the new year. Top reading website, M. Chapter 2557. When Adam saw this message, he spat out the mutton skewer in his mouth onto the ground. He wiped his mouth and eyes, and looked at the message from the young master. 3 seconds later, Adam cried out innocently, "What's wrong with me now?" Zhou. Come out, you stinking brat. Look at what you've done this time. He just carried Yuan out to play, Lan Su suddenly said as she took a bite of the barbecued sausage and crossed her slender legs. Once Adam heard that his idiotic son had gone out to play with Ce's darling again, it was obvious that something serious must have happened. Adam slapped his hand on his head, looking helpless for the first time. Dang dang, your son is just like you, peeing on Tiger's head every day. Shuang suddenly hooked his arm around Adam's shoulder and affectionately called him by his new nickname. Shuaying's new nickname for Adam was Dang Dang, in return for the nickname, Wang Er, that Adam used to call him. Scram, scram, scram. Brother Wang Er. Adam slapped Shuaying's hand away from his shoulder and said angrily. However, everyone knew that Adam's fierce tone was purely a joke with Shuaying. Ha ha ha. When Shuaying heard Adam's words, a joyful smile appeared on his handsome face. However, the deep scar on his neck looked a little sinister. In the end, Yun Jian took a quick shower and came out of the room with Ce. Papa. When she saw Ce, the little girl rushed over. Zhou couldn't hold the little girl in the end. He was afraid that she would fall, so he squatted down and put the little girl down on a clean beach. As soon as the little girl landed, she crawled over to Ce like a little loach. Normal children usually started learning to walk at the age of 1. The little girl and the little girl were only 6 months old, so Ce didn't let them learn to walk early for fear that they would fall. However, the little girl could already stand up by holding onto the stairs and railings. The little girl could also stand up by holding onto objects if someone helped her. However, she still crawled normally. Furthermore, the speed at which it crawled was extremely fast. Ce bent down and picked up the little girl before Yun Jian could. Mama. The little girl looked up at Yun Jian in Ce's arms. When Yun Jian heard this, she pursed her red lips and walked over. The little girl held Yun Jian's hand and bent down to hold Ce's hand. And then placed Yun Jian's hand in Ce's large hand. He he. He he he. When the little girl saw this scene, she happily clapped her hands and shouted. Of course, the little girl couldn't hold Yun Jian's and Ce's hands by herself. Of course, Yun Jian and Ce doted on the little girl and would naturally do as the little girl asked. This little girl has turned into a spirit. Ha. Speaking of which, young master, please forgive me. Sending me to the Amazon or something like that, or... Adam walked over and laughed out loud. However, just as Adam said this, he was frightened by Ce's sidelong glance. Cough. Rascal, come with me. Young master, I'll definitely teach this rascal a lesson when we get back. Adam walked over and grabbed Zhou. Then, he left as if he was escaping. Only then did Ce's deep brows slightly relax. As soon as he turned around, the little girl used her completely powerless hand to hold on to Ce's head. Then, she used her other hand to hold on to Yun Jian's head. She even shouted happily. Papa. Mama. Kiss kiss. Kiss kiss. M. Chapter 2558. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Qin Yiru's mother called her old friend, page 1/1, the little girl used all her strength to knock Siyi's head against Yunjian's head. Yunjian's face was flushed red. Qin Yiru, Gu Junjian, Shuang, Lin Wei, Mo Sun, Luo Mei, Lan Su, and everyone else were standing around them. Moreover, the people around them were all looking at them. When Qin Yiru saw this scene, she suddenly remembered that not long ago, the little girl had held a photo of the family of four with Yunjian, Ce, and the little girl. In the photo, Yunjian and Ce were folded so that they were kissing. She was really a mischievous child. She knew everything. Who was the one who taught him that? Seeing this scene, even Qin Yiru was a little shy. Qin Yiru hurried over, clapped her hands, and coaxed the little girl in a coaxing voice, Yuan, come, Granny will carry you. Your brothers have all gone to the beach to ride the waves. Granny will take you to play with them. Come, no. Kiss kiss. Kiss kiss. Sob sob sob. Papa, Mama, kiss kiss. I want a kiss. The little girl spoke in a voice that was not very accurate, as if she understood Qin Yiru's words. She shook her head violently, as if she was going to cry if she did not listen to her. The little girl's request was really too embarrassing. Yunjian really did not know whether to move or not to move. Just when everyone thought that Ce would reject the little girl's request and throw the crying little girl into Qin Yiru's arms as usual, Qin Yiru carried her away. Ce carried the little girl with one hand, and pressed the back of Yunjian's head with the other hand in front of everyone. He bent down and kissed her seductive little mouth. This scene happened very suddenly. Everyone was stunned. When they came to their senses, they all screamed, "Oh!" He kissed her. He actually kissed her in front of everyone. Young master. Young mistress. Young master. Young mistress. Adam led the crowd. Just as he shouted this, Lan Su hit him on the head. Go home and kneel on the washboard if you want to create more atmosphere. This was indeed effective, as Adam quickly shut his mouth. After being kissed by Yunjian, the next minute felt like a century. Her face was flushed red, and her cheeks were a little soft. Until Ce released hers on her lips were her translation, her until her was her translation, her until her was translation. Is? At 11 at a translation at around 11 at translation at on s translation in buses at. It was Mo Bufan and the others from the Martial Arts Society, Xinjiang Towns Lu Fian, Chen Sini, Zhang Xiaofan, Ling Yichen, the remaining 6 members of Team Monarch, Tier X Squad, Most Awesome Squad, and Captain Lu Cheng were all here. As for the Kosha mercenaries, they were not here yet. The Kosha mercenaries had the ability to find their way here. Those who were close to Yunjian usually took the bus that Yunjian invited and were brought here directly. Muing isn't here? Yunjian asked Team Monarch's Chu Ning after scanning the area and not seeing Muing. Back in high school, Muing met her in Min City Military Academy, so Team Monarch's Chu Ning also knew Muing. I went to look for her. She said she'll come tomorrow morning, said Chu Ning. Hearing this, Yunjian did not have any other suspicions. The group followed Yunjian into the luxurious holiday villa that could accommodate a few hundred people. Among those who came were Xinjiang Town's Qin Yiru's relatives. As Qin Yiru's mother, Zhang Meihua naturally came second. Just as they got out of the car, Zhang Meihua pulled Qin Yiru aside and told Qin Yiru, Mom called some old friends over today. You have to cooperate and not embarrass Mom in front of everyone. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Chapter 2559. Today, not only were Zhang Meihua's relatives present, she had also invited some of her younger and older friends. When one reached middle age or old age, they loved to brag about how rich their juniors were, where they had bought a few houses, how many betrothal gifts they had received from the groom when their daughter was married off, how grand the engagement party and wedding were, how rich the groom was, and how well their granddaughter had married. This was probably what Zhang Meihua's generation loved to brag about the most. When they were young, everyone loved to brag about the things of the younger generation. When they were old, there were also things that the elderly would brag about themselves. This was a path that everyone had to go through in life. Zhang Meihua had invited some of her close friends who she used to hang out with. She had wanted to show off how great her granddaughter was in front of them, so she had brought them along. Yun Jian and Zhang Meihua had always been on bad terms. Of course, it was Qin Yiru who had arranged for Zhang Meihua to be present. Yun Jian would not force Qin Yiru to do anything, nor would she bother with Zhang Meihua. Qin Yiru could only nod helplessly at her mother's request. Everyone entered the house. Everyone gathered in the living room of this super luxurious seaside villa. Qin Yiru had prepared tea leaves to brew tea for the guests. At first, the group of old friends that Zhang Meihua had brought along were still praising Qin Yiru for giving birth to a good daughter. As the group of old women asked, they asked about Siyi's parents. Qin Yiru did not know nor had she met Siyi's parents, so she could only shake her head. Oh my, they're about to get married. Yiru, haven't you seen how the other party's parents look like? An old woman who was about 1.79 meters tall and slightly plump, but did not look fat because of her height, raised her voice as if she had picked on a bone. Zhang Meihua's family background, this group of old women had all heard Zhang Meihua's exaggerated boasting. Naturally, they were extremely envious. However, the other party was rich. Other than congratulating them verbally, the group of old women were secretly upset and wanted to pick on them when they spoke. Qin Yiru shook her head when she heard the old woman's words. No. What about the betrothal gifts? They're already engaged. When they get married, how much will the betrothal gifts be? The old woman who was 1.79 meters tall asked again after hearing Qin Yiru's words. After that, the old woman paused. Without waiting for Qin Yiru's reply, she continued, Yiru, your daughter is the director of new cruise. She's filthy rich. Without a betrothal gift worth tens of millions, I'd like to see who can marry your daughter. In this day and age, it's not enough just to be good-looking. In the future, the woman will earn money while the man relies on his looks. Sooner or later, they'll have to break up. This old woman with a height of 1.79 meters was called Wang Xuanfang. Wang Xuanfang was about the same age as Zhang Meihua. Wang Xuanfang was used to Zhang Meihua bragging about how great Yun Jian was in front of her. Now that she had picked a bone, thinking that Siyi was marrying into the family and Yun Jian was marrying into Siyi's family, she exaggerated. To put it bluntly, she was mocking Siyi for being poor and penniless. Yun Jian was amazing, but marrying a man who might not even be able to fork out the wedding money was enough to make her a laughingstock. There was no perfect person after all. Wang Xuanfang chuckled inwardly, thinking about exaggerating the matter when she went back. However, less than half a minute after Wang Xuanfang said those words, a cold and magnetic male voice suddenly sounded out. With lightning speed, he directly replied to Wang Xuanfang, Adam, pass down the order. After the engagement banquet starts tomorrow, all restaurants in Country Z will operate for 3 days free of charge to celebrate my and Xiaojian's engagement. All expenses will be charged to my account. M. Chapter 2560. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation all his money to her, page 1/1, the magnetic male voice rang out suddenly. Other than Wang Xuanfang, the other old ladies sitting in the living room of the luxurious holiday villa were chatting with each other in delight before a sumptuous feast. Not all the old ladies from Xinjiang town were chatting with Qin Yiru. It had been a long time since they had gathered together. In accordance with the nature of old women who loved to gossip, they were sitting around, drinking tea and talking boastfully. Of course, it was only a few days after the end of the year. The old ladies were bragging about their son and daughter's last year's income, as well as their grandson and granddaughter's academic results and results in their final exams. Wang Xuanfang had thought that no one was listening to her, so she spoke to Qin Yiru in a tone that she thought was considerate of Yunjian. Who knew that right after Wang Xuanfang's last sentence about Yunjian and Siyi's falling apart sooner or later, Siyi's reply was like a slap to Wang Xuanfang's face. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone present was completely stunned. Yes. Young master. It was only when Adam put away his frivolous smile and nodded at Ce as he walked out of the luxurious holiday villa to arrange the matter that everyone snapped back to reality. Oh. All the restaurants in the country will be open for free for 3 days. How much will this cost? Wang Xuanfang was stupefied. Her rosy cheeks were now glowing white as she listened to Ce's words. Wang Xuanfang didn't know how to react for a while. Sitting next to Zhang Meihua was a short old woman with yellowish skin and obvious wrinkles on her face that had been crushed by the passage of time. She was a little tanned. She was a shrewd and frightened old woman. All the restaurants in the country will be open for free for 3 days. Let's not talk about the whole country. Even in Longmen City, it'll cost at least tens of millions to open for free for 3 days. In Jia province, it'll cost at least hundreds of millions. It might even cost billions. If it's the whole country, then, the short old lady's name was Rong Jiaoxian. She was almost 60 years old and was considered ugly among the group of old ladies. Rong Jiaoxian was a primary school teacher when she was young. She had a pension after retirement, so she was considered more authoritative among the group of old ladies and had led a decent life. She was considered a cultured person at best, but teachers who were usually fierce to their students when they were young were full of wrinkles when they were old. Rong Jiaoxian was one such example. What? Billions? When Wang Xuanfang heard the number of billions, she had already stood up with a swoosh. Her eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets, and her face was green and purple. Is Jia province? Rong Jiaoxian said, is Jia province? The 2004 population in 2004 was. Even, was is translation is was translation was translation? Is. Was. I didn't know your son-in-law was so rich. But even if he's rich, he shouldn't be spending it like this. Ask him to take back his plan, no matter how rich he is, he'll go bankrupt if he spends it like this. Moreover, it's just an engagement. Can your daughter withstand such a grand occasion? Wang Xuanfang spoke to Qin Yiru after she recovered from her shock. She was trying to get Qin Yiru to talk Ce out of it. Wang Xuanfang had thought that Ce was not good enough for Yunjian earlier, but now, she felt that Yunjian was not worthy of Ce marrying her with such a grand display. Moreover, Ce would probably go bankrupt if he did this. He might as well give them more in return if he had so much money. However, Wang Xuanfang did not have the time to finish her sentence. Just as Wang Xuanfang said that, Shuang slammed his phone on the table without waiting for Ce to step in. He glanced at Wang Xuanfang from the corner of his eye and repeated what Ce had told him earlier. All restaurants in Country Z will be open for free for 3 days. You'll only need to spend 10 days of my young master's income. Young master's betrothal gift to young madam is that all the money and assets in young master's account will be given to young madam. Not a single cent will be left. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.